Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a trip down an old, forgotten path, one that leads to a bridge no one dares cross anymore. It's an ancient structure weathered by time, hidden away in the thick woods just beyond the edge of town. Most people avoid it, leaving the bridge shrouded in rumors, folklore, and, well, something a little darker. You probably won't survive this if you really think about it. But hey, if you're brave enough to listen, stay with me. Let's see what happens. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I don't want any half-hearted clicks. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. There was always something unsettling about the old bridge, something that kept the townsfolk from going anywhere near it. It sat on the edge of a small, sleepy town, where whispers traveled faster than the river that ran underneath it. People had always told stories about it, stories that no one really cared to question, because no one really dared to find out for themselves. It had stood there for over a century, its stone structure crumbling with age, its arches stretching high above the dark river below. The trees surrounding it were thick, their branches twisted in strange angles like the limbs of something far older than anything that should have existed in this quiet part of the world. The bridge was first built as a simple crossing, connecting the townspeople to the forest, beyond a gateway to trade routes and distant settlements. But over time, it became something else. An old legend began to circulate, one that spoke of a tragic event, a loss that bled into the wood and stone of the bridge itself. The town elders tried to dismiss it, of course, brushing it off as folklore. After all, this was a small town with too much time on its hands, and the bridge wasn't exactly the most lively spot in town. But in the hearts of the people, there lingered a quiet fear, one they didn't speak of aloud. Every time someone got close, there was a feeling, almost a presence, that seemed to watch them. Most didn't understand it, but they felt it all the same. It wasn't until the sun began to set that people would talk openly about it, when the shadows stretched long, and the world seemed to shrink in the fading light. They would gather in groups, whispering their warnings to anyone who would listen. Stay away from the bridge when the sun goes down. Just don't do it. It wasn't until one autumn evening that I decided I'd had enough of these stories. I'd grown up hearing them, listening to the hushed tones of my parents and the older folk at the diner. Every time I asked why no one would cross the bridge, the answers were always the same. It's just bad luck. Or worse, some things are better left alone. And so, as many curious souls have done before me, I decided I would go and see for myself. Maybe I was foolish, but I wasn't afraid. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? It was nothing more than an old bridge, perhaps a little eerie, but nothing that would keep me from crossing it. I set out, just as the light began to fade, walking down the dirt path that led toward the woods. The sun dipped lower, its orange glow fading, and the first stars began to blink open in the sky. The path was narrow and winding, hedged by thick trees whose branches formed archways overhead, blocking out most of the fading light. Every now and then, I could hear the sound of a twig snapping or a rustle in the underbrush, the forest alive with sound. It wasn't long before the bridge appeared ahead, just as I had imagined it, sitting like a silent sentinel among the trees. The stone was dark, streaked with moss and mildew, and the wood on the bridge itself was warped and sagging, covered in an almost unnatural layer of mildew. The air around it seemed thicker, denser. It was as if the very ground below it was holding its breath, as if it were waiting for something or someone to cross. I took a hesitant step onto the bridge. The wood groaned beneath my weight, the sound faint but noticeable in the quiet of the evening. The river below churned in the darkness, its waters rushing in a way that didn't seem natural, as if something below the surface was stirring just out of sight. With every step I took, the bridge seemed to come alive, its very structure pulsing with a strange, unsettling energy. The air around me grew colder, a thin mist rising from the river and swirling around my feet. I reached the center of the bridge, and for the first time I stopped. Something was off. The weight in the air grew thicker, the feeling of being watched even stronger. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt an undeniable chill creep up my spine. I had to force myself to look up, but when I did, I felt my breath catch in my throat. Above me, the trees seemed to form a canopy that twisted unnaturally, almost as if they were reaching toward me. The sky above had gone dark, but it wasn't the familiar pitch black of night. It was deeper, like the sky was absorbing all the light around it. There was a faint buzzing sound in the distance, like the whisper of voices too quiet to hear, but they're all the same. A shiver ran through me, and I realized that I wasn't alone. From the darkness beneath the bridge came the faintest hint of movement. It was nothing at first, just a shadow, a ripple in the river. But then the water grew restless, churning and twisting, as if something was rising. My pulse quickened as I turned to face the source of the sound, and as I did, I saw something that made my stomach lurch. Something was moving beneath the bridge, something dark and massive, its shape barely visible through the mist, the ripples of water distorting its form. The shadow grew larger, the water now swirling violently, as the shape approached, slowly creeping closer. The buzzing sound in the air grew louder, and I couldn't tell if it was the sound of the wind or something far worse. I backed away, but before I could take another step, the mist began to close in around me. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps, and a cold, clammy sweat broke out on my skin. It wasn't just the mist now. It was the very air, thick with an oppressive weight, the feeling of something watching, something waiting. And then from behind me, I heard the unmistakable creak of the bridge. The sound of the bridge creaking beneath my feet intensified each groan, echoing in the thick, heavy air. It wasn't the normal noise that a decaying bridge might make. This sound was deeper, as if the very foundation of the structure was being pulled under, like it was no longer content to simply stand, like it was alive, yearning to move. I froze. My breath caught in my chest, a sense of dread curling in my stomach. Behind me, the mist continued to thicken, swirling with unnatural energy. I could feel it pressing against me, wrapping itself around my limbs like cold, wet fingers holding me in place. My heart pounded harder, my thoughts racing. What was happening? The air felt suffocating, like it was being drained from my lungs, and I could barely manage to take in a full breath. I looked down at my feet, half expecting the ground beneath me to begin cracking or crumbling, but nothing changed. Still, that faint ripple in the water below grew stronger, more pronounced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving in the darkness beneath the bridge. It was as though the very river itself had come to life, its murky depths, no longer just water, but something far darker. A sudden sound broke through the tension, the faintest whisper barely audible but unmistakable in the quiet of the night. I strained my ears, trying to catch it again. It was coming from beneath the bridge, from the depths of the mist that seemed to spill out from the water itself. The whisper was faint, yet filled with a strange, almost familiar voice. It sounded like pleading. I stepped back cautiously, every nerve in my body screaming for me to turn and run, but my feet wouldn't move. The pull of the bridge of the dark water below was too strong. I could feel myself drawn to it, like I was bound to the spot, like I was tethered to something that wanted to keep me there. The whispering grew louder, more distinct now, as if it were speaking directly to me, its words twisted and jumbled, unintelligible at first. But then, through the dissonance, I could make out one word, that sent a chill straight to my bones. Help! The word echoed in the air, stretching and twisting until it felt like the very earth around me was vibrating with it. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I finally managed to tear my gaze away from the shifting water below. The bridge, once an innocuous structure, now seemed to loom over me, its stone arches bending with an unnatural curve, as if the bridge itself was watching me, waiting for me to make a choice. I took a step back, but before I could move further, the sound of footsteps behind me sent a shock of terror through me. I spun around sharply, my pulse racing, but there was no one there, nothing but the deep shadows of the woods and the low, unsettling hum of the night. I was alone, or at least I should have been. I couldn't understand why my mind seemed to be playing tricks on me. Perhaps it was fear. I had heard the stories. I had dismissed them so easily. But now, standing on this bridge, I could feel something real, something alive pressing in on me. The weight of the air was thick, suffocating. My breaths became shallow, panicked, my chest tight, as if the mist itself was constricting around me. I needed to leave. I have to leave, I thought, but my legs wouldn't respond. Instead, I turned back toward the center of the bridge, almost as if some unseen force was pushing me. The whisper came again, clearer this time, louder, insistent, and as it did, the surface of the water below shifted. There in the moonlight, a shape emerged from the depths. Slowly it rose, tall, dark, and formless. At first a shadow against the rippling surface of the river. As it rose higher, I could see the outlines of something much darker, something not entirely human. The creature's body seemed to twist, as if it were made of the very mist itself, shifting and writhing like smoke. Its limbs extended unnaturally long, its form stretching and contracting in the water, as though it was caught between two worlds, one above, one below. I staggered backward, my heart pounding in my throat. This couldn't be real. There was no way this could be happening. But yet, I was standing here frozen in place, unable to look away. The creature's face began to form slowly in the water, distorted, blurry at first, but then more defined. It was a twisted mockery of a human face, pale and gaunt with hollow eyes that stared directly at me. Its lips, thin and cracked, parted in a slow, deliberate grin, revealing teeth that seemed far too sharp to belong to anything that should have been alive. Help! The voice was no longer a whisper, but a raspy, guttural sound crawling up from the depths of the river, like it had been buried in the earth for centuries. The words echoed in my mind, as much as they echoed in the air. I tried to turn away to run, but my body wouldn't obey. My feet were glued to the bridge, the sensation like being drawn into the dark water below. The air around me thickened further, the weight of the creature's presence pressing in from all sides. I was caught in the grip of something old, something far beyond my understanding. The bridge was no longer just stone and wood, it had become a doorway, a threshold to something far darker. The creature's grin widened, and its long, gnarled fingers reached toward me, inching closer with every passing second. My chest tightened in fear as it moved toward me, the sounds of its body shifting in the water growing louder. The bridge groaned beneath me, its stone arches vibrating like the bones of something ancient waking from a long slumber. I could feel the presence behind me, the growing sense of the forest closing in. It was not just the creature anymore. The entire bridge, the river, the trees, the land itself was watching, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I had to move. I had to escape. With a burst of strength I didn't know I had left, I turned and bolted toward the far side of the bridge, my heart racing in my chest. The bridge creaked and groaned as I ran, its structure trembling beneath my feet. The mist swirled thickly around me, choking the air. But I didn't dare stop. The sound of something following me echoed behind me, and though I dared not look back, I could feel the presence of the creature growing closer, the ground beneath my feet becoming slick with the mist and moisture of the river. But I wasn't sure if I was running away from it or running towards something much worse. The darkness ahead beckoned, but my mind screamed for me to keep running. I didn't dare look back. The sound of the water splashing behind me, followed by the faint, sickening creak of the bridge, pushed me forward. Every step felt like it might be my last. The fear clawing at my heels, driving me to run faster to escape whatever it was that had risen from the river. The air around me seemed to thicken with each passing second, the mist swirling like a dense fog, choking the path I had once thought so familiar. The light of the moon above flickered, the trees casting long, sinister shadows that seemed to stretch toward me as though they were alive, reaching out with unseen hands. I couldn't see the path clearly through the haze, but I knew I had to get off the bridge, had to get away from whatever it was that followed me. I pushed my legs harder, each footfall more desperate than the last. The bridge groaned again, louder this time, the sound echoing in the air like the scream of an old animal trapped in the throes of death. The wood beneath me shuddered. The ropes creaked as though they were about to snap, and I felt the bridge sway under the weight of something unseen, something waiting just beyond my reach. I was nearing the edge of the bridge, just a few steps from solid ground, but then the mist thickened. A cold gust of wind swept through, swirling the fog so intensely that I could barely see the ground beneath me. My foot caught on something, a loose stone perhaps, and I stumbled, falling to my knees. The air seemed to pulse every breath I took, growing heavier, suffocating. I could feel it again, the pressure from behind closing in on me. The water below seemed to surge once more, as though the river itself was alive and moving in response to the creature's presence. My heart hammered in my chest, and I forced myself to stand my knees, weak with the shock of it all. Then the whispers came again, soft, nearly imperceptible at first, like a wind through the trees, but growing louder, more insistent. "Help me." The words weren't just a whisper anymore. They were a command, a call that resonated from the river below and rattled in the bones of the bridge deep within the earth itself. I tried to move faster, to pull myself away, but the world around me felt heavier with each passing moment. I could hear something large, something massive moving through the mist behind me. It wasn't just a creature anymore. It was a force, an unrelenting presence filling the space between the trees, creeping up to meet me. I stumbled again, this time losing my balance, and with a sharp breath, I fell toward the side of the bridge. My hand shot out to catch myself, grasping for anything, but the surface felt too smooth, slick with moss and moisture from the river below. I could hear the water rushing beneath, the sound of it growing louder, more deafening, as if it were rising, closing in. And then I heard it clearer than ever. The voice, or what could only be described as the voice, coming not from the creature, but from the very river itself. "Help me," it said again, the whisper rising, growing desperate. But it wasn't just a whisper. It was a pleading, a voice that beckoned with force, pulling at my very soul. I stood on unsteady legs, trying to focus, trying to make sense of what was happening, but the air grew colder. The night had fallen so silent I could hear my own breath, shallow and fast. My body was shaking uncontrollably, and my head was spinning with exhaustion, fear, and confusion. This was it. I needed to leave. With a final burst of adrenaline, I reached for the edge of the bridge, my hands slipping across the wet surface, trying to find solid ground. I pulled myself forward, ignoring the sting of cold stone on my palms, until I was on the edge, almost there. Just a few more steps, but just as my foot hit the ground, the world went dark. The light around me seemed to blink out entirely, like a heavy veil had fallen, smothering the moonlight. The fog around me thickened instantly, and the shadows of the trees morphed into dark, twisting shapes that danced at the periphery of my vision. I couldn't see anything clearly, and the world around me felt like it was spinning, shifting. Then, without warning, I felt the ground beneath me tremble. It wasn't just a shake, it was as if something deep below had moved, causing the earth itself to quake with a low, rumbling growl. The bridge shuddered again, and the unmistakable groan of the ancient wood reverberated through the air like it was alive, like it was screaming in agony. The creature, whatever it was still behind me. The whispers now had an urgency to them, a call to me, and I could hear it more clearly now. Help. Me. Suddenly, something surged from the ground, and before I could react, an unseen force slammed into my chest, knocking me backward. My breath escaped in a rush as the cold air surrounded me, the wet mist pushing against my skin. What was this? A dark shadow. A shape lunged from the ground beneath me, like the tendrils of the earth itself reaching for me. The forest was alive in ways I couldn't comprehend, and it was pulling me in. I felt myself being dragged back toward the river, my feet unable to find purchase as the world around me twisted. The bridge groaned again, and the shadows reached up toward me, their forms stretched, growing larger. A pair of glowing eyes appeared before me, emerging from the swirling mist. They were large, glowing with a sickly yellow light reflecting the moon in their depths, and they fixed their gaze directly on me. I was trapped in the dark, trapped on this bridge. The shadowy figure opened its mouth, revealing teeth that were far too sharp, too many twisting in grotesque shapes. And as it reached for me, I realized there was no escape. The last thing I saw was the dark river, its waters thrashing with violent force, pulling everything it touched into its depths. And as I was drawn closer to the edge, I could hear the final whisper of the creature's voice, a soft, eerie hum that echoed one last time in my ears. Help me! And then the world went black. The darkness pressed in around me, an all-encompassing void that swallowed everything. My limbs felt numb, as though they were no longer my own, floating in a sensation that wasn't entirely sleep nor consciousness. I was suspended between two worlds, one of waking life, where the bridge and the creature existed, and one of shadows, where I couldn't quite remember the rules. I had no idea how much time had passed. It could have been seconds, minutes, hours. The only thing I knew for sure was that the air around me had grown heavier. It smelled damp, like the earth after a storm, and I could feel the coolness of the river's mist still clinging to my skin. But there was something else now, something deeper and colder. Then a sound pierced the silence, a soft creaking followed by the unmistakable groan of the bridge, as if it was awakening from a deep slumber, stretching ready to resume its twisted task. I was on the bridge again. Slowly, I blinked my eyes open. The fog was thick around me, but I could make out the faint outline of the stone arches of the bridge. It was there. The very structure I had tried so desperately to escape just moments ago. The sense of dread I had felt before hadn't left me. If anything, it had only grown stronger, like an invisible force pressing down on my chest, squeezing my lungs tighter with each breath. I couldn't move. My limbs felt sluggish, as though they were weighted down with something unseen. I tried to call out, but no sound came from my throat. Panic fluttered in my chest as I realized I was not alone. The air around me buzzed with an energy that was foreign, unfamiliar, and alive. And then I saw them. Shapes, dark, shifting, impossible shapes, loomed in the mist ahead. Their edges were undefined, wraith-like, their forms twisted as though they were caught between two worlds. The shadows stretched longer, twisting toward me, reaching out like claws. I tried to pull back, but my body wouldn't respond, as though the bridge itself was holding me in place. A low, guttural hum reverberated through the air, a sound that seemed to resonate deep in my bones. The whispers returned this time, not from the river, but from the very air around me. Help. Me. The voice was faint at first, but the longer I stayed in the thick, suffocating mist, the clearer it became. It was a voice I had heard before, but now it was no longer a whisper. It was a chant, a beckoning call coming from all directions. I couldn't see the source of the voice, but I could feel it, the weight of it, pressing into my mind, pulling at the very core of my being. The bridge groaned again, louder this time, as if responding to the call. The mist thickened further, and the shadows around me seemed to pulse, to breathe. I wanted to run to escape, but the bridge felt like it was part of me now. I could feel the vibrations in the wood, in the stone, in the very ground beneath me. The bridge was no longer just a structure. It was alive. It was waiting. The dark shapes in the mist grew more defined. I could see the faint glow of their eyes, now hundreds of them glowing like embers in the darkness. They were watching me, waiting for something. The air was thick with anticipation, as though everything around me was holding its breath. And then, as if in response to some unspoken command, the figures began to move toward me. I tried to back away, but it was useless. The shadows closed in their shapes, twisting and writhing, forming into vague, human-like figures that seemed to melt into the mist. Their faces were obscured, but their movements were unmistakable. They were coming for me. Help. Me. The voice whispered again now, impossibly close, as though it were speaking directly into my ear. I felt the coldness of it, the desperation. The shadows reached out their hands, or what I thought might be hands growing closer, their touch cold and unyielding. The sound of the bridge groaning grew louder, the noise becoming a shriek, a screech that made my blood run cold. The very structure of the bridge seemed to pulse with life, the stone arches bending and warping under the pressure of whatever dark force had taken root here. It felt as though the earth itself was breathing beneath me, every exhale pushing me closer to something I could not see, but could feel creeping in. And then I saw it. A shadow detached from the others, a figure standing tall in the center of the bridge. It was human, or it had once been, but now it was something else. Its form was hazy, its edges blurry, but I could make out the long, flowing shape of a cloak. And beneath the cloak, two glowing eyes pierced through the darkness, locking onto me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. It raised a hand toward me, and the temperature around me dropped sharply, the air turning to ice. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the entire forest, the entire world was chanting in unison. Help! Me! The voice came from all around, and then it seemed to come from inside my own mind. Help us. The figure's hand reached closer, its fingers long and skeletal. Its eyes, those glowing, unnerving eyes, never left mine. I could feel its gaze pulling at something deep inside me, as though it was looking for something. The shadows behind it writhed, their forms shifting like smoke, swirling in time with the figure's movements. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost to the thick, oppressive air, swallowed by the weight of it. The bridge beneath me shuddered again, its groans now interspersed with the whispers, the chants. The world was closing, in the space between me and the creature narrowing with every passing second. In that moment, I realized something horrifying. The figure wasn't just watching me. It was waiting for me to move, for me to make a choice, and suddenly it all made sense. The whispers, the shadows, the pulling sensation in my chest. The bridge wasn't just a structure. It was a doorway, a gateway to something darker, something ancient and hungry. And I had walked straight into it. Help! The voice called again, and this time I couldn't tell if it was asking for help or demanding it. I didn't have time to think. I turned and ran. I ran, heart pounding in my chest, as though I could outrun the terror chasing me. My feet pounded against the bridge, the creaking and groaning of the ancient wood beneath me, echoing in the night, like the cries of something far older, something that had been waiting for me. The mist churned around me, thick and oppressive, the shadows moving in rhythm with my desperate pace. The figure I had seen before was still there, standing in the center of the bridge, but I didn't dare look back. I could feel the darkness closing and the weight of it pressing on me, suffocating me with every step. It wasn't just the bridge now. It was the very air itself, thick with an energy I couldn't comprehend. The whispers grew louder, faster, each one overlapping the last, until the words blurred together into a single frantic chant. Help! 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 The wind howled in my ears, and the river below seemed to surge, its waters rising and falling in unnatural waves, as though it too were alive, as though it were part of the same force that was pursuing me. The sound of the water became deafening, a constant rhythmic thrashing that felt like the pulse of the earth itself, beating in time with my frantic heart. I pushed forward, my legs burning with exhaustion, but I couldn't stop. The bridge stretched endlessly in front of me, and I could feel it, a presence, dark and cold, chasing me, stalking me from behind. The footsteps I had heard before, those low, slow, deliberate steps, now echoed in my mind, matching the pace of my own frantic movements. Something was gaining on me, something that was not human, something that I could never outrun. I glanced back only for a brief moment, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The figure from earlier was no longer standing still. It was moving toward me, its long cloak billowing behind it like smoke, its glowing eyes locked onto me. Its hands were outstretched, its fingers elongating as it reached for me, and in its wake, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, growing longer, more tangible. I stumbled my foot, catching on the uneven wood of the bridge, and for a split second, I thought I might fall. The bridge was old, its wood warped and cracked, and I could hear the telltale snap of a beam beneath my weight. But somehow, I managed to regain my balance and continue running, though I could feel the ground shaking with each step. The sound of the bridge creaking grew louder, more insistent, as if the entire structure were groaning under some immense pressure. The air around me felt colder now, the temperature dropping rapidly, and the mist swirled like a living thing wrapping itself around me, pulling me deeper into its embrace. I could hardly breathe, the thick fog clogging my lungs, and every breath came with a sharp, painful inhale. But I couldn't stop. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, minutes, hours, but it felt as though I had been running for an eternity. The end of the bridge still wasn't in sight, and the shadows seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness swallowing the light around me. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further, and the world around me went still. The bridge, the mist, the whispers, they all stopped, as if the entire world had held its breath. A silence so thick and suffocating filled the space, and in the midst of it, I could hear something far worse than the sounds that had chased me. It was the quiet sound of something waiting. My heart stopped in my chest as I realized what it was. The creature was no longer behind me. It was ahead. I came to a sudden skidding halt, my feet slipping on the slick surface of the bridge. I couldn't see it, not yet, but I could feel it, its presence ahead of me, standing just out of sight, waiting in the shadows of the bridge. The air around me grew even colder, so cold I could see my breath in the dim light. The river below had gone eerily quiet, and the forest surrounding me seemed to have fallen still, as if everything in the world had paused, as if the earth itself had gone silent in anticipation. Then, from the darkness ahead, I heard the sound, a low, guttural growl, deep and resonant, vibrating through the air. The shadows before me flickered, twisting, and from them emerged the figure, towering and monstrous, like a nightmarish silhouette, its outline barely visible in the dense fog. The eyes, the same glowing yellow eyes, pierced through the mist, staring directly at me, and I felt the world narrow to just those eyes. The creature's form slowly materialized from the fog, its body stretched tall and thin, with long, sharp limbs that reached out toward me. Its face was a twisted, grotesque mask, with no human features, just a hollow, gaping maw and sharp, jagged teeth. The smile it wore wasn't just a grin, it was a predatory smile, as though it took pleasure in my fear, in my confusion, in my desperation. "Help!" It whispered again, but this time the voice wasn't coming from the creature itself. It was coming from all around me, from the very bridge, from the earth beneath my feet. It was as if the entire place had been waiting for me, pulling me toward it, drawing me into its grasp. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, unable to break free from the creature's gaze. The mist thickened the air, growing heavier, colder. The bridge was no longer solid beneath me. It felt like it was sinking, like I was standing on a sinking platform, and with every second the weight of the world seemed to press down on me harder. "Help!" The voice was louder now, sharper, like the hiss of a snake. I knew then that there would be no escape. The bridge had me trapped, and whatever this creature was, it wasn't here to simply watch me run away. It was here to claim me. The world around me started to blur, the edges of reality fading, and the last thing I heard was the creature's voice now, a shrill, distorted scream that echoed through the very foundation of the bridge. Then nothing. The darkness didn't come all at once, but rather in layers, each one more suffocating than the last. It was as if I had been swallowed by the very bridge itself, a place that once felt so familiar and solid, now twisted and warped by whatever ancient force had been lying dormant beneath it. My mind raced, trying to grasp the situation, but everything felt impossible. It was a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. I could no longer feel the solid ground beneath my feet. My legs felt weightless, and yet there was an unexplainable pressure, like something invisible was pressing down on me from all sides. I tried to scream, but my voice didn't emerge. No sound came, only the distant hum of the river below, its murmur, now an echo that reverberated through my very bones. It wasn't the peaceful flow I had heard earlier, but something far darker, like the river itself had become a conduit for something far worse. In that crushing silence, I began to feel the weight of the creature's presence, the terrible truth of what it was, what it had become. It was no longer just a shadow in the mist. It was a force, something that had lived for longer than I could comprehend. The eyes of the creature, those glowing orbs, were burned into my mind, and I could still feel them watching me even now. Even as the darkness closed in around me, I struggled to move my body, feeling heavier by the second, as though the air was thickening, suffocating me from all sides. The world had no edges now. It was just an endless fog, dark and suffocating. And then there was a shift. A slow, deliberate tremor that coursed through the bridge. It wasn't just a physical vibration. It was as if the bridge itself had become an extension of the thing that had risen from the depths. The stone creaked under the weight of it. The wood groaned and the entire structure seemed to pulse as though the bridge was alive, breathing, waiting. I could feel it. The shift. The pull of something unseen and energy building beneath the bridge. A pressure that made my chest ache. The world tilted around me, the mist swirling faster. The bridge creaking louder, as if it were in the final throes of its descent. And then, from the depths, from the very earth beneath me, I felt the tug, the pull sharp and cold, like something was reaching for me, something unseen, something that wanted me. I gasped, my breath shallow, as the sound of whispers returned louder now, growing in intensity, until it was impossible to ignore. These whispers weren't just surrounding me, they were inside me, crawling into the deepest corners of my mind, flooding my thoughts, demanding attention. The voices became more distinct, more urgent. Help! They cried their words, a jumble of desperation and hunger, a mixture of pleas and commands. But they were no longer just the voices of the creature beneath the water. They were the voices of the bridge itself, of everything tied to this cursed place. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen, locked in place as though I had become part of the very structure around me. The fog was so thick now that I could barely see my hands in front of my face. The air was dense, wet, with the smell of mildew and decay, and the whispers pressed in on all sides, as if the bridge itself were consuming me. The shadows that once seemed distant and vague now crawled along the edges of my vision, stretching out from every corner, like reaching hands eager to pull me into the dark. A figure stepped into the fog in front of me. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and its form was vague, shifting like the mist itself. But the eyes, those eyes burned through the dark like twin beacons. I could feel them even before I saw them. The figure's presence radiated with an energy I couldn't understand yet. It felt ancient, as though it had always been here, lurking beneath the surface of the world, waiting for the right moment to rise. The figure's face was obscured by the mist, but I could sense its form, its long, skeletal limbs, its outstretched hands grasping for me. It wasn't just a shape anymore. It was hunger, the hunger of something that had waited centuries for its time to come again. The whispers continued now, so loud that they felt like they were coming from inside my skull. Help. The word was no longer just a request. It was a demand. And then the creature moved its form, shifting closer, its long fingers reaching for me, stretching toward my face. I could feel the air around me growing colder, and with every step it took, the air grew thicker, like the very breath of the world was being sucked away. In that moment, I realized with chilling clarity, it wasn't just the creature that was pulling me toward it. The bridge itself was pulling me in its structure, alive, its stone and wood laced with ancient energy, and it wanted me, wanted my presence, wanted my essence. I was caught tangled in its web, and the more I fought, the more it pulled. My mind reeled, but there was nothing left to do but brace myself against the cold that enveloped me. The shadows were closing in faster, and I could feel the weight of their presence pressing against me, suffocating me. My heart raced, but the more I struggled, the more I realized that there was nowhere to go. The whispers reached a crescendo, and suddenly, the bridge beneath me shifted violently. The stones cracked the wood, splintering beneath my feet, and with a final sharp creak, the entire structure seemed to collapse inward, folding under its own weight. The darkness surged forward, and the last thing I saw were those glowing eyes burning into mine. And then nothing. The silence was absolute. I woke with a sharp breath, my lungs aching as though I had been holding my breath for an eternity. But as I took in the cool air, it felt wrong, so still, so dense. I opened my eyes, but the world around me was as black as it had been before, the same suffocating darkness pressing down from all sides. I couldn't move at first, my body numb and heavy, as if the very sensation of being alive had been drained from me. It was like waking from one nightmare into another. And the deeper I sank into this oppressive silence, the more I felt the weight of it all pressing on my chest. For a long moment, I simply lay there, suspended in the pitch-black void, listening. The world around me was eerily quiet, too quiet. Not a single rustle, not a single whisper of wind. It was the kind of silence that screamed in your ears, making every breath feel louder, every thought more urgent. I slowly tried to lift my arm, but it felt like my body had been replaced by something foreign. My joints locked and my skin felt strangely numb, as if the world itself had gone cold and indifferent. I was surrounded by nothing, just an empty space void of sound, void of light. It wasn't the fog anymore. It wasn't the mist. It was nothing. A deep, endless darkness. I could still feel the faint sensation of the bridge beneath my feet, the wood that had once creaked and groaned under the weight of my steps. But now there was nothing. No bridge, no water, no mist. Just the suffocating dark. How did I get here? My thoughts felt fragmented, breaking apart and shifting like pieces of a puzzle that no longer fit. I couldn't remember how I had come to be in this place. Had I fallen? Had the bridge collapsed beneath me? Was I dead? The thought chilled me deeper than the darkness itself. I swallowed hard, trying to push the panic away, but it surged uncontrollable, rising up from the pit of my stomach. I wasn't dead. I knew that. I wasn't gone. I had to be here. But where was here? As the seconds dragged on, I began to feel something else. Something far more unsettling, a presence. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the air, a shift I couldn't quite place. The darkness was not just empty. There was something in it, something watching. I could feel it hovering in the blackness, but it wasn't quite like before. It wasn't just the creature from the bridge. This was different. It was everywhere. It was the darkness itself. It pulsed with a strange, slow rhythm like the beat of a heart I couldn't see, but one that I could feel. I strained to move, to push myself up, but my body remained uncooperative, as though it had forgotten how to respond. The heavy, suffocating pressure of the darkness held me in place, as though the very air had turned to liquid, thick and sticky, pressing down on my lungs, making each breath a labor. Then in the deepest recesses of the silence I heard it, a whisper. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. The voice came from somewhere above me or below, or maybe just through me. It was low, like a hiss, ancient, and cracked, a whisper filled with hunger and dread. My body froze as I recognized the word, help. It wasn't just a word. It was a command. It clawed at my mind, making my skin prickle with fear, as though it were trying to reach into my soul, to pull out something buried deep inside me. My heart skipped, my breath quickened, and my eyes darted around, though there was nothing to see. I couldn't escape the voice. It reverberated through the very air around me, wrapping itself around my thoughts, pulling them downward into the depths. I wasn't alone. The voice came again, louder this time, filled with desperation, and something darker, something twisted. The sound was like fingernails scraping against stone, a sound that felt wrong, too wrong. It rattled my very core. My head throbbed, the intensity of the whisper growing unbearable. It wasn't just a voice. It was a presence, a weight that pressed against my mind, my thoughts, my very will. "Help me! Help me! Help me!" The words twisted, turning into something unintelligible, a garbled cry that rattled the air like a storm about to break. And then, a figure appeared in the blackness before me. I didn't see it with my eyes, not in the way you would expect. It was more of a feeling, a sensation, a presence forming from the darkness, like a shadow emerging from the depths of the night. The air around me thickened, and though I couldn't see it fully, I could feel its weight. It was tall, towering above me, its form obscured by the darkness, but it was there. The pressure it radiated was suffocating, and I could feel it pushing in on me, folding my chest inward with every breath. A chill crawled up my spine as I realized that the figure, whatever it was, wasn't just present. It was waiting for me to acknowledge it, waiting for me to look, and then I felt it. The slightest, faintest touch, cold, unyielding, as if something invisible reached out and grazed my face like fingers made of ice. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Help me." My body refused to move. The darkness closed in further, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I wondered if I was truly awake, or if I had slipped into a dream so deep that there was no waking from it. But no, I was awake. I could feel the cold bite of the air. I could feel my heart racing, my skin crawling. There was something in the darkness, something I couldn't yet comprehend, and I knew then that I was no longer just trapped in the void. I was trapped with it. The creature, the bridge, the whispers, the hunger, and there was only one thing left to do. I had to leave, but first, I had to face it. The darkness was absolute, a thick blanket that pressed down on me from all sides, suffocating any hope of escape. But I could feel it now, the presence. It wasn't just watching me. It was entwining itself around my thoughts, growing more solid by the second. My body screamed to move, to flee, but it felt as if the world itself had stopped me, had frozen me in place. The air was colder now, and I could hear the faint sound of something shifting in the distance. It was subtle at first, like the rustle of dry leaves, but it grew louder, more distinct, like footsteps moving closer, closer, closer still. Each step echoed with a rhythmic certainty, like the slow, methodical approach of something that had all the time in the world. Something ancient. Something that could wait for an eternity, but still it would move toward me. And with each passing second, it was moving. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, trying to gather my thoughts, but the whispers didn't stop. They were louder now, filling the air around me with their desperate calls. "Help me." They weren't just words anymore. They were begging, their tone distorted, not pleading, but demanding. Each whisper scraped at the inside of my mind, pulling me deeper into the nightmare. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, dense, and my chest felt tight with fear. My body trembled with each passing second, not from cold, but from an overpowering sense of dread that flooded every fiber of my being. I knew I had to get away, but my legs refused to obey. They were stiff, locked in place, as if the darkness itself had turned my body to stone. Then, from the void ahead of me, something moved. It wasn't just a shape in the darkness. It was the darkness itself. The form shifted in and out of focus, a silhouette of jagged edges and twisted limbs, its presence so enormous that it seemed to fill the entire space. It towered above me, blocking what little light there was, a suffocating mass of shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The ground beneath me shifted again, and I felt the unmistakable tremor of something rising, something heavy and ancient, something alive. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the very air was charged with their desperation. "Help me. Please. Help." But now the voice was no longer just a whisper. It was a scream. a guttural, tortured scream that seemed to split the air and rattle my bones. My hands shook violently, but still I could not move. The presence in front of me loomed larger, its form coming into sharper focus. The figure's features twisted grotesque. Its face, if it could be called a face, was a blank mask of shadow, with only two glowing, haunting eyes that stared directly into mine. They were like orbs of light, sickly yellow, flickering, with an intensity that burned through the darkness. I wanted to scream, but my mouth was dry. The words wouldn't come. The creature's eyes bored into me, pulling me in, forcing me to look. It wasn't just looking at me. It was searching me, as if it was probing my very soul, looking for something. And then the voice, it came from within me. You can't escape. The voice wasn't my own, but it was inside my mind, its resonance shaking me to the core. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a command, a truth. The presence closed the distance between us, its form shifting and swirling like smoke, its edges flickering in the fog. It reached out its long skeletal hand, extending toward me. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. I was locked, frozen in place, unable to do anything but watch as the hand came closer. Its fingers sharp and elongated, clawing toward my face. I felt the icy chill of its touch before it even made contact. The skin on my cheek went numb, the cold so intense it burned. The fingers grazed my skin, and a jolt of pain shot through my body. It wasn't the pain of something physical, but of something far worse, of something invading my very being. I could feel its coldness seep into me, creeping into my chest, into my heart, into my mind. I opened my mouth to scream, but again nothing came out. The creature's touch was suffocating, pressing in, controlling. I could feel it reaching deep inside me, pulling, dragging, consuming. The world seemed to tilt again, and I felt myself being pulled forward, the dark force dragging me closer, deeper into the center of the mist. I fought against it with all my might, but it was no use. The darkness was too strong, too vast. The whispers in my ears were deafening now, a chorus of voices, not just the creatures, but the voices of everything the bridge had consumed over the years, the lives lost to its curse, the souls trapped within its grasp. Help, the voice whispered again, but now it wasn't just asking. It was demanding. I felt my knees buckle, my body no longer able to hold itself up. I collapsed onto the bridge, my hands scraping against the wet wood, desperate for something solid, something real to hold on to. But the bridge was nothing more than an illusion, now a thin veneer of reality breaking down under the pressure of the darkness that had overtaken it. The whispers, the presence, the creature, they were closing in, filling the space with an unbearable weight, drowning me in the suffocating air. In that moment, as the cold darkness enveloped me, I realized the horrifying truth. I wasn't just trapped on this bridge. I was becoming a part of it. The world around me seemed to collapse in on itself, the edges of reality blurring as I struggled to make sense of what was happening. The bridge beneath me, once a solid structure, now felt like it was disintegrating the wood, and stone crumbling away like dust. The weight of the creature's presence, the suffocating force of the darkness was too much. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt as if it were being crushed under the weight of something far older than time itself. I could still feel the coldness of its touch, the icy fingers pressing against my skin. But now it was more than just touch. It was inside me, inside my very thoughts, pulling at the edges of my consciousness, twisting and contorting everything I thought I knew. It was as if the darkness was erasing me piece by piece, pulling apart the very fabric of who I was, turning me into something unrecognizable. My mind screamed in protest, but it was drowned out by the whispers. Help! Me! The voices rose and fell like the tide overwhelming me, dragging me further into the depths of the darkness. The presence before me, the creature, or whatever it had become, loomed large, its glowing eyes fixated on me with an intensity that felt suffocating. I could see its mouth wide and gaping a void filled with darkness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. I had never been so terrified in my life. But even as the fear overwhelmed me, a strange, sickening pull began to take over. I couldn't resist it. There was a part of me that wanted to submit, wanted to give in to the darkness, to stop fighting, to accept that I was already lost. The air grew colder, sharper. The mist thickened around me, and I could feel it tasted in my lungs, filling me with an icy numbness that spread through my body like poison. I wanted to scream, to run, but the words wouldn't come. I was frozen, my body a lifeless puppet caught in the grip of something far beyond my understanding. I looked down, hoping for some semblance of escape. But the bridge was no longer the bridge I had walked upon just moments before. The wood had turned black, the surface slick and treacherous, like oil that had seeped into the very bones of the bridge. The stone arches, once sturdy and ancient, had twisted into strange, grotesque shapes, their forms distorting as though they were being pulled by an unseen force. And then the whispers grew louder. "Help! Help me! Help us!" I couldn't tell where the voices were coming from anymore. It felt like the entire world was speaking at once, no screaming, and I was drowning in it. The very bridge beneath me seemed to cry out its wood, creaking and snapping under the pressure of the weight it could no longer bear. "It wants me." The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. The creature, the bridge, the whispers. It wasn't just asking for help. It was pulling me in, drawing me into its grip, wanting to consume me, to make me part of it. I could feel it now, the gnawing sensation inside me, the way it was pulling at my soul, slowly devouring everything that made me me. It wasn't just the creature from the water. It was the bridge itself. It was the very land, the very curse that had been placed on this place. I felt my body being pulled toward the center of the bridge again against my will. My feet moved on their own, stumbling forward, drawn by the dark force that was now all-encompassing. The air around me felt heavier, as though the world was collapsing inward, pressing me down into the earth. "Help me!" The voice came again, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was right behind me. So close, I could feel its breath on my neck, cold and sharp like ice. I turned slowly, unable to stop myself, and there, just inches away, stood the figure from before, the one whose glowing eyes had locked onto me. Its face was now clearer, its features more defined, but it was no longer just a face. It was a mask of twisted horror, a grotesque parody of humanity, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly into my soul. It reached out its fingers, long and spindly like blackened branches, and I felt the pressure around my throat, like its grip was closing in on me, squeezing the air out of my lungs. My chest burned, my vision blurred. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. The figure's mouth opened wide, far wider than should have been possible, and I could hear it speaking, but not with words. It was more like a command, a compulsion that filled the air, twisting my thoughts. I could feel its presence invading my mind, pushing away all resistance. It was taking me, taking everything I had left. "Help. Help me. Help us." The voice was no longer a whisper. It was my voice, but not. It was a distorted version of me, as though my very essence was being torn apart, turned into something darker. The bridge, the thing was feeding on me, pulling me in, and I realized that I was no longer just a victim. I was becoming a part of it. I could feel the change, the slow shift inside me, my thoughts growing darker, my will slipping away. I was fading, losing myself to the darkness, My breath came in desperate gasps, but the air was thick, and each inhale felt heavier, as though I was breathing in the fog itself. My fingers curled involuntarily, the mist around me growing colder and denser. I could feel the presence of the creature, could sense its hunger as it loomed closer. Its eyes still fixed on me. The whispers grew louder, the voices rising in unison, a twisted chorus of pleas and commands. Help, and then, as the creature's hand finally closed around my throat, a dark, inescapable pressure crushed my chest, and I was pulled into the abyss. I thought I would suffocate, that the darkness would close in and swallow me whole, but instead, the pressure released suddenly, as if the grip had never been there at all. The air returned to my lungs sharp and cold, and I gasped, drawing in a deep, desperate breath. But it wasn't just the cold that stung my skin. Now, it was a presence. I blinked, trying to make sense of my surroundings, but I couldn't see anything clearly. The darkness, thick and impenetrable, enveloped me again, pressing against my eyes, my mind, everything. But there was something else too, a shifting feeling, as though I was no longer standing on solid ground. I was moving. I could feel it, the ground beneath me, shifting, swaying like the surface of water. Had I fallen into the river? But as I tried to move to sit up, I realized that I wasn't wet. There was no water beneath me. The only sensation that reached me was the soft, crumbling feeling of earth, the weight of something ancient pressing in on me. I was somewhere, but I didn't know where. A flicker of light caught my attention. It was dim, a faint glimmer in the distance, like a firefly trapped in a dark jar struggling to break free. I tried to reach for it, to move toward it, but my body felt heavy again, as though the air around me had thickened once more, pushing against my every attempt to move. The whispering voices still echoed in my ears, now faint but unmistakable, still calling to me. Help me! The voice wasn't just the creature anymore. It was the bridge, the river, the land itself, like 1,000 voices woven together into one desperate cry. I could feel it, hear it deep in my chest, as though the earth beneath me was pulsing alive with a hunger it had kept buried for far too long. I fought the urge to fall back into that suffocating place, the one where I felt weightless, lost to the force around me. My fingers dug into the dirt, but it wasn't solid earth. It was soft yielding. I pushed myself up, my head spinning, and for a moment I thought I was going to fall again. But then, light, the faintest sliver of moonlight, pierced through the darkness enough to cut through the fog that clung to everything. It illuminated a small patch of ground in front of me, and as my eyes adjusted, I could make out the details of my surroundings. The space I was in was small, confined. I was lying in a hollow, some kind of cave perhaps, or an abandoned space within the bridge itself. The walls were made of stone, cold and wet with condensation, but the real shock came when I looked down. The ground was covered in bones, not animal bones. These were human. The bones were long and brittle, their remains scattered across the floor like they had been here for centuries. Some were broken, others twisted, their forms bent in unnatural ways. The sight made my stomach churn, but it wasn't just the bones that caught my attention. It was the faint, sickly glow emanating from them. It wasn't the natural glow of decay. It was something unnatural, something that seemed to pulse with energy, with power, with hunger. I could feel the pull again. The darkness at the edges of the cave seemed to flicker in time with the glow, and I knew this place was not empty. I wasn't alone. The whispers came again, louder now, their sound almost frantic, tearing at my mind. Help me. The words came with a force, but now they weren't just the voice of the creature. They were the voices of the bones, the remains of the souls that had been consumed here, trapped by the bridge's curse, by the ancient force that had awakened. I backed away from the bones, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding. I needed to leave. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. The voices were growing louder, more insistent, as though they were trying to reach out to me, to pull me in, to make me one of them. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, the stone of the walls pressing closer, like the space itself was closing in. The bridge, the place that had once seemed so solid, was alive. It had been feeding on something, on the souls of the lost, on the souls it had taken over the years, and now it was waiting for me to become part of it, to join them. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, and I realized with horror that the presence that had watched me earlier, the thing beneath the river, the creature that had claimed me, was now in here, with me, in this place, in the very walls around me. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick again, almost suffocating. I staggered to my feet, trying to push forward, but my body was weak, drained. I couldn't keep my thoughts straight, couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of being pulled under, dragged into the very soul of the bridge itself. And then, just as the darkness seemed to reach its peak, I saw it, a flash of movement ahead of me, a figure silhouetted against the faint light emerging from the mist that clung to the walls. The figure was tall, thin, and its form was jagged, broken, as if it had been torn apart and pieced back together. But it was moving toward me, and its eyes, those same yellow, glowing eyes, were fixed directly on me. The whispers intensified, 1,000 voices crying out in unison. But this time, they weren't begging. They were commanding. The figure stepped forward, its long, twisted limbs stretching toward me, and I realized then that there was nowhere to run. The darkness had me. Help me! The voice again, this time a guttural cry, and I felt it deep within me, like the bridge had opened up and its hunger had become mine. It was too late. The figure reached out, and I fell into the darkness. The world spun violently around me, and for a moment I thought I was falling through nothingness, just an endless, suffocating void. But then, a sudden jolt of sensation hit me like a wave, and I realized I was no longer falling. I was standing. But it wasn't solid ground beneath me anymore. It was soft, damp, and cold. I could feel it underfoot, shifting and pulsing with an unnatural energy. I opened my eyes slowly. The darkness around me, now a muted gray, lit only by the faintest glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The air was thick, cloying, and smelled of rot, old decaying wood, damp earth, and something far worse. It was the same feeling as the bridge, the same overwhelming presence that had once filled the air, the same suffocating pressure that clung to my skin, my soul. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I was paralyzed. The moment I tried to move, the world around me shifted like the very ground was responding to my fear, to my thoughts, to me. The shadows seemed to stretch out from the edges, enveloping me in a cold that made my heart race. My head throbbed. A low hum began to fill the space, a sound that was almost imperceptible at first, but grew louder and louder until it reverberated through every fiber of my being. It wasn't just a sound. It was a force. It tugged at my mind, a vibration so intense it made my teeth ache, pulling me in, dragging my thoughts deeper into the heart of this place. I tried to step forward, but as soon as I did, a force cold sharp held me in place. Something was holding me, locking me to the spot. I couldn't move. The air seemed to close in, thickening around me like smoke, and the shadows around me grew more distinct, more tangible. I could feel them, as if they were brushing against my skin, like hands, fingers, invisible claws reaching out to claim me. And then I saw it. The figure, the one with the glowing yellow eyes, was there again, standing in front of me, its tall, broken form twisting in the mist. The figure's face, or what remained of it, was a mask of decay, a grotesque, twisted mockery of human features. The mouth opened wide, its jagged teeth glinting in the half-light, but it wasn't speaking. The sound, the hum, was coming from the creature itself, from its very body, like a vibration that echoed from the very core of this cursed place. But I could feel its presence now, closer than ever. It was more than just an apparition. It was a part of this place, woven into the very fabric of the bridge of the land of the darkness. It was a manifestation of the hunger, the darkness that had been waiting here for centuries. It had no need to speak. Its presence alone was a command, a force, a will. I could feel its eyes on me, though I didn't look directly at it. I couldn't. Something in my mind screamed that if I looked into those eyes again, I would lose myself entirely. But I didn't need to see it clearly to understand what it wanted, what it had always wanted. I was its prey. I could feel the pull of it, the tug at my very soul growing stronger with every breath. The darkness around me shifted again, pulling me toward the center of the room. It felt as if the ground beneath me was swallowing me whole. The mist thickened around me, swirling like a storm, drawing me deeper into its depths, into the center of its hunger. My heart raced, my mind screaming at me to escape, to run, but I couldn't move. The creature's presence grew heavier, pressing in on me, and as I struggled against it, the whispers began again. They were louder this time, a chorus of voices all overlapping, all desperate. "Help me! Help us! Help!" And then I saw it, the bridge, or what was left of it. It wasn't just an old structure anymore. It had become something far worse. It was a thing of nightmare alive, pulsing with an unholy energy. Its stone arches warped and twisted, its wooden beams creaking like the bones of something ancient, something waiting to consume everything in its path. I realized with horror that I wasn't just standing on the bridge. I was the bridge now. The dark energy that had once called me to the edge had now taken me, pulling me into its grasp, weaving me into the cursed foundation of the very thing that had ensnared so many others before me. And then the ground beneath me shifted again, and I was falling through the mist, through the darkness. I could hear the echo of my own scream, but it was swallowed by the hum of the creature's presence. The ground opened up beneath me, and I was being dragged deeper, pulled into the very core of the cursed bridge, where nothing would ever escape. I felt myself being pulled through the stone, through the earth itself, as though the bridge was devouring me whole. My skin burned with the cold, my heart thumping in my chest. The whispers of the lost souls, their souls filled my ears, echoing louder. Now, their desperate cries mixing with the creature's hum, until it was all I could hear. I felt the world shifting around me again. The sensation of weightlessness took hold as I was pulled deeper into the belly of the bridge, deeper into its darkness. But in the very last moments of consciousness, one thought pierced through the fog of my mind. The bridge had no end. It wasn't just pulling me under, it was pulling everything else under too. And as I disappeared into the dark, I understood the bridge was an eternal thing, and it would never stop feeding. Time felt irrelevant. Time no longer existed in the same way. Every moment stretched out endless and thick, but also so fast, like an eternal breath, held and never released. The deeper I was pulled, the more I felt myself unraveling, no longer sure where the bridge ended and where I began. My body seemed to cease being anything solid. It was as if the bridge had absorbed me, pulled me into its very core, where I was no longer just a victim of the darkness, I was a part of it. I felt myself sinking into an abyss of memories, fragmented and distorted. Faces, voices, moments, things I had once known, things I had forgotten flashed before my eyes. They were like ghosts moving in and out of focus, their outlines twisted, broken, as if I were seeing them through fogged glass. But there was no peace in these fragments. They were distorted, pulled into the suffocating pull of the bridge, warped by whatever malevolent force had claimed it. A voice, one that was unmistakably mine, echoed through the dark. Help. But it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't a cry for mercy or a plea for release. It was the voice of something lost, something that had been here for far too long, something consumed by the bridge. I could hear it, feel it in my bones. It wasn't just me anymore. The world around me churned, and I was no longer aware of the space. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only feel the weight of it, the pressure of the bridge's hunger, its endless craving that had consumed not just me, but the souls of countless others. The darkness wasn't just around me, it was within me now, wrapping around my mind, coiling around every thought, until I could no longer tell what was mine and what belonged to the bridge. And then, like a flicker of light breaking through the suffocating fog, I saw it, a shadow, a shape moving in the distance. At first, it was hard to make out, but slowly it grew clearer, its form becoming more distinct. I thought I was imagining it, but as it drew closer, I knew it wasn't a figment of my mind. It was someone who had once been a part of this cursed place. The figure moved through the dark, its form tall and gaunt, wrapped in shadow, its face hidden beneath a hood. The air around it seemed to ripple, distorting, like the reflection of a broken mirror. But it was those eyes that grabbed me, those deep, hollow eyes staring into mine. They weren't just eyes. They were voids, black holes pulling at me, drawing me into them. But there was something familiar about them. I didn't recognize the figure yet. There was a strange sense of connection, like I should know it, like it had been there with me the whole time. The figure stepped closer, its movement slow, deliberate. It reached up, pulling back its hood, revealing a face twisted and broken. The skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over bones. But there was something in its expression, something familiar, something I had seen in the mirror once. Its mouth opened, revealing sharp, broken teeth, but it was the voice that sent chills through me. It was a rasping whisper, like it had been buried alive for ages. You cannot escape. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The figure's eyes bore into mine, unblinking, and for a moment, I thought I saw myself in those eyes, the reflection of everything I had become since crossing the bridge. I was not the first to fall prey to its hunger, and I certainly wouldn't be the last. The figure was not here to help me. It was here to show me what I had become. The weight of it all crashed down on me, the realization that I was trapped in this eternal place. The bridge wasn't just a cursed relic. It was a prison, a place where time did not exist, where souls were consumed, where they were transformed into something else, something darker. It wasn't just me. The bridge had taken others before me, and it would take others after. It had fed on them, consumed their very essence, turning them into shadows, figures that wandered the bridge forever, lost in the fog, forever repeating their last moments trapped in the cycle of its hunger. The figure in front of me stepped closer, its broken face tilting as though studying me. Join us. The words were not a request. They were a command. I recoiled, my mind screaming in protest. No, I would not become like them. I would not be trapped, consumed, lost to the darkness. but the power that held me in place was too strong. The weight of the bridge's hunger pressed down on me, pulling at my very soul, trying to claim me. I couldn't think, couldn't fight it anymore. The shadows swirled around me, and I felt myself being drawn deeper into the abyss, into the heart of the bridge. The whispers surrounded me again, louder, more desperate. Help. But it was no longer a cry for mercy. It was a call, a summons. The bridge wanted more. I tried to resist, to push back, but the darkness was relentless. I could feel the cold fingers of the mist curling around my limbs, pulling me closer to the waiting void. I could see the figure now, its eyes burning brighter, its mouth stretching into a grotesque grin. And then, the moment I feared came. I could feel it deep in my chest, the final pull, the final tug of the bridge. The hunger had claimed me. The darkness swallowed me whole. I wasn't sure if I was still alive. I wasn't sure if I was anything at all. The moment the darkness swallowed me whole, the world seemed to vanish. No sounds, no sensations, no light. It was as if I had been cast into a void where nothing existed except the oppressive weight of emptiness. The sensation of falling continued, but it wasn't a fall through space. It was something far worse. It was as if the very fabric of reality had unraveled, leaving me adrift in a place where time didn't exist, where memory and thought had no meaning. Then a shift, a tremor, a feeling that I was being pulled somewhere, dragged through the dark. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, a mixture of rotting wood mold and something far fouler that I couldn't name. But even amidst the suffocating darkness, I felt it a presence. It lingered around me, crawling along my skin like invisible fingers reaching into my soul. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came. My body felt as though it had been stripped of its essence, as though it were nothing more than a hollow vessel, empty and cold. But the presence, it was there. I could feel it like an oppressive weight pressing on my chest, forcing the air from my lungs. And then the whispers. They started again, low at first, but growing louder, more frantic, until they filled my mind with their maddening chorus. They weren't just voices anymore, they were a force, a presence swirling around me, pulling at my thoughts. Help me. Help us. Help. The voices shifted, overlapping, blending together into a cacophony of desperate cries and distorted pleas. But in the heart of it, there was something else, a new voice, one I hadn't heard before, one that cut through the noise like a sharp blade. It was calm, detached almost, familiar. You can't escape. The voice wasn't the creature from the bridge. It wasn't the hum that filled the air. It was the bridge itself. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating in the very core of my being, as though it were a part of me, and I was a part of it. I tried to move, but my body was still heavy, unresponsive. The darkness pressed down, and I could feel the walls of it closing in around me. It was the bridge again, I realized. It had consumed me, taken me into itself, into the very bowels of its curse. I was trapped inside it now, and there was no way out. The ground beneath me shifted, becoming soft, yielding. The air grew colder, and I realized with a sickening lurch that I wasn't alone anymore. The whispers that filled the space were alive. They weren't just sounds, they were voices of the lost, the souls that had been consumed by the bridge over the years. Their spirits trapped in this wretched place, forever caught in its hunger. I could feel them pressed close, swirling around me like the mist that had haunted the bridge, like the shadows that had reached for me before. Their touch was cold, icy, but it wasn't just their fingers that brushed against my skin. It was the feeling of being watched, of being examined, of being judged by something far older and darker than I could comprehend. And then, through the darkness, I saw it again, the figure the same tall, gaunt shape that had appeared on the bridge, its glowing eyes burning into my very soul. It was there, its body half-formed, distorted, flickering in the shadows. It wasn't the same creature I had encountered on the bridge. It was something worse. Something that had existed for as long as the bridge itself. Something that had always been there, waiting for me to fall into its grasp. I could feel it reaching out, its long, twisted fingers extended toward me, pulling me closer. The air around me thickened, and the darkness seemed to close in with every movement I made. I couldn't escape. I couldn't move. The figure stepped forward, its eyes locked onto mine, and I felt the pull again, that crushing weight inside my chest. It wasn't just the creature that wanted me now. The bridge itself was hungry. The souls of the lost, trapped in the very stones of the bridge, had all become part of it, part of the curse that had been placed on this place. The darkness had consumed them, and now it was ready to consume me. You are ours. The words were not spoken aloud, but felt inside my mind, inside my very soul. The creature's voice was the voice of the bridge. It was the voice of the curse. And now, it was my turn. I fought against the overwhelming force pulling me closer, the pressure building inside me, but it was futile. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was being pulled into the dark, into the very heart of the bridge where its hunger had been waiting. My vision blurred, and the whispers grew louder, the cries of the lost all merging into one desperate, suffocating chorus. It wasn't just the creature I had to fear. It was the bridge itself, the thing beneath the stone and wood. The curse that had been placed upon it had never let go. It had never stopped feeding, never stopped taking, never stopped consuming. I was the next in line, and there would be no escape. The last thing I saw before the darkness claimed me was the glowing eyes of the creature locked onto mine, and the weight of its hunger crushing my soul. You belong to us now, and then nothing. The world did not end in the way I had expected. There was no sudden darkness, no sharp finality. Instead, there was a soft, suffocating pull like being submerged in cold water, but without the drowning. I didn't feel my body being consumed. It was more like my sense of self was dissolving. The weight of the bridge of the curse pulled at me from all directions, not as a sharp, crushing force, but as a slow, creeping drain of everything I had once known to be real. It was as if I had become part of the bridge part of the stone part of the earth beneath it. My thoughts no longer felt like my own. I could still hear the whispers louder now, echoing in my ears. And they weren't just words, they were memories. The voices of the lost. The souls that had been trapped here before me. They weren't asking for help anymore. They were calling me. The whispers, now intertwined with memories of my own life, began to pull at me, taking hold of my mind. I could feel myself slipping, no longer a person, but a voice among the many voices that had come before me. Had I always been a part of this, I wondered, as the voices began to fade into a distant hum, blending with the oppressive darkness that surrounded me. Time had no meaning in this place. I couldn't tell if I had been here for moments or years. I no longer had any clear sense of where I ended and the bridge began. I was being consumed, not physically, but in a far more subtle way, my soul, my essence dissolving into the curse of the bridge. The creatures, the figures, they were all a part of this place. They had always been here. The mist, the shadows, the whispers, they were just the bridge's way of calling to me, of pulling me closer, of making sure I stayed. It wasn't a trap. It was a cycle, one that had never ended. Every soul that walked across this cursed bridge, every soul that had been drawn into it, had become a part of it, and now I was no different. The glowing eyes of the figure appeared before me again, piercing through the fog, But it was different this time. Its gaze wasn't filled with hunger anymore. No, it was something else. The eyes burned with understanding. They had seen this before. It was just the next part of the process. The bridge had claimed me, and now I was bound to it, just like the others before me. My body wasn't important anymore. My identity wasn't important anymore. I was becoming them, the lost souls, the voices, the shadows. We were all part of the bridge now, part of the curse. The whispers around me grew louder, not in volume, but in depth. They weren't just voices anymore. They were thoughts, memories from lives, long forgotten voices blending together into one vast, ancient chorus. You are one of us now. The words echoed both from the creature and from the countless souls that had been lost here before me. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. It was inevitable. The bridge was alive, and it had consumed more than just the bodies of the lost. It had taken their memories, their consciousness, and now it was taking mine. I could feel the tug in my chest, in my very soul. I was being drawn deeper, but not into the darkness. I was being pulled into the core of the bridge, into the heart of its hunger, into the truth of its curse. I no longer had control of my body, my thoughts. But in that moment, I felt a deep, sickening understanding. This wasn't just about being trapped in a physical place. This was about something far darker. The bridge didn't just take lives. It took souls. And it didn't let go. The glowing eyes of the figure before me flickered, fading into the mist. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anything. There was nothing left but the pull, the endless, unrelenting pull of the bridge pulling me into the dark. And then I understood. There was no escape. There never had been. I was a part of this bridge now, a part of its hunger, its curse. I was one of the lost, one of the voices that would call out forever, eternally. I had crossed it, and I had become it, and so I was absorbed into the curse, my identity stripped away, my soul consumed. The voices around me grew quiet, and the darkness seemed to solidify, wrapping me in a cold embrace. I was no longer me. I was just another part of the bridge, another soul lost to its hunger. There would be no end to it. There would only be the endless pull, the eternal call. The bridge had claimed me, and it would never let go. The air around me felt different now, thicker, colder, as if the very fabric of the world had changed, woven into something darker, more sinister. I had crossed the bridge, yes, but now I could feel that I had crossed into something much worse, something that existed beyond the realms of time and reality. The bridge, it had taken hold of me, and I was no longer sure of where I ended and where the bridge began. I could feel its pulse, its heartbeat deep within me, as though it had become one with my very essence. The fog enveloped me, creeping in around my legs, seeping into my skin, filling my lungs with its cold, heavy weight. I stumbled forward, but the world around me seemed to shift, bending and warping in ways I couldn't understand. The air grew thicker with each step I took, and the whispers returned louder, now more insistent, as though the very land was speaking to me, begging me to hear its call. "Help me." The voice was faint at first, barely a whisper, but I could hear it clearly, unmistakably, coming from all around me. It wasn't one voice, it was many. They all spoke at once, their cries overlapping, becoming a single desperate sound that gnawed at the edges of my mind. The words echoed in my ears, reverberating deep within my soul, pulling at me, twisting me, until I could feel my very thoughts unraveling. I tried to ignore them, to push the whispers away, but they wouldn't stop. They were inside me now, buried deep in my chest, and I realized with a sickening feeling that I wasn't alone. The bridge had become a part of me, and I was becoming a part of it. The very air around me pulsed with its hunger, its insatiable need, and the weight of its presence pressed down on me like an invisible force, crushing the life out of my body. As I moved through the fog, the world around me began to take shape. The bridge was no longer just a structure. It was something alive, something ancient and dark. The stone beneath my feet seemed to shift to breathe, as though the earth itself had become part of the curse that had ensnared it. I could feel the bridge's pull its hunger, and it was getting stronger with every step I took. And then as I reached the center of the bridge, I saw it, the figure. It stood there just beyond the mist, its form barely visible in the gloom. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, two yellow orbs that burned with an intensity I couldn't look away from. The figure was tall, far too tall for any human, and its limbs were elongated, twisting in unnatural angles. Its face was obscured by the darkness, but I could feel it watching me, watching, waiting. The whispers grew louder. The voice called again, "Help me." The figure stepped forward, its movement slow, deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. And then its voice joined the chorus, rising above the others, clear and strong. "You have come." The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. The creature's presence radiated from it a force that pressed into my very being. It wasn't just the figure that held me captive. It was the bridge, the curse that had woven its way into the very fabric of this place. And now it had claimed me. I was no longer a traveler. I was part of it, part of the land that had been corrupted by its insatiable hunger. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the ground, my body frozen in place as I stood before the figure. Its eyes bore into mine, and for a moment I could feel it feel what it wanted. It wasn't just my body. It wanted my soul. It wanted everything I was, everything I had been. The figure smiled, a twisted, grotesque smile that sent a cold shiver down my spine. "You belong to us now." The voice was deep rumbling like the growl of some ancient, forgotten beast. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, and I realized in that moment that I had never truly escaped the bridge. I had never truly left. The moment I crossed over, the moment I stepped onto the cursed wood, I had become a part of it. There was no end to this place. There was no leaving. The bridge had no beginning and no end. It was an eternal prison, and I was one of the souls it had claimed, one of the lost that would never escape. I could feel it now, the bridge's hunger. It was a part of me, feeding on me, consuming me from the inside out. I was becoming like the others, the souls trapped here before me, their voices lost to the mist, their forms twisted into something else, something that could never be free. The figure took another step forward, its eyes never leaving mine. "Help me," the voice whispered again, but it wasn't the voice of the figure. It was mine. It was the voice of every soul that had crossed the bridge, every soul that had been devoured, every soul that had become part of the curse. The darkness around me grew thicker, suffocating, pressing in from all sides, and I realized that I had lost myself. I had lost everything. I had become part of the bridge, part of the hunger, and now I would never leave. The figure's presence loomed closer, its form expanding and contracting, as though it were made of the very darkness surrounding me. I could feel the weight of it, the unbearable pressure on my chest, the suffocating tightness in the air, the gnawing sensation in my soul. It wasn't just watching anymore. It was waiting. Waiting for me to succumb, to give in to the pull of the bridge. The whispers around me grew louder, their voices now indistinguishable from one another. They were no longer pleading for help, not for me at least. They were inside me, filling my mind, twisting my thoughts. The very air I breathed seemed to choke me with its cold, damp breath. My skin felt raw, as if it were being peeled away by invisible hands. I could feel the bridge, its hunger sinking into my bones, seeping into my blood, and yet despite everything, despite the pressure and the weight of the curse pressing down on me, there was a flicker of resistance within me. A tiny spark, a defiance. I was not ready to be consumed. The last remnants of my will fought to rise, clawing its way up from the depths of my soul, trying to break free from the suffocating fog that surrounded me. I had to break free. There had to be some way to escape this nightmare, my breath caught in my throat. The figure loomed closer, its glowing eyes locked onto mine. I could hear its breath, a deep, resonant hum vibrating through the very ground beneath me. My body trembled uncontrollably, the air around me thick with the weight of its presence. "You can't leave." The words echoed inside my head, loud and undeniable. The voice was no longer just a whisper, no longer just a sound, it was a truth, a reality. The bridge had me. It had me. I was no longer just an outsider, a curious soul who had stumbled upon its cursed paths. I was now part of it, just like the others who had been consumed before me. I could feel it, the weight of their souls, buried within the wood, the stone, the mist, all of them, waiting to pull me deeper into the abyss. I tried to move, to break free, but it was futile. The weight of the curse was too heavy. The shadows closed in, wrapping themselves around my limbs, pulling me closer to the figure, to the hunger. The air became suffocating, thick with the scent of rot and decay. My vision blurred, and the world around me twisted into an endless void of shadows, of lost souls, of empty whispers. Help! The voice was mine, but not. It was the voice of all the souls that had come before me, the voice of the bridge, the voice of the curse. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't meant to leave. There was no escape from this place, from this hunger. I was part of it now. My soul, my essence was part of the bridge, trapped within the twisted, decaying wood, forever bound to the cursed foundation of the place. I could feel my consciousness slipping away, my mind dissolving, becoming one with the countless others who had crossed this cursed path. The figure's eyes gleamed brighter, and its mouth stretched wide into a grin, a twisted, grotesque grin that revealed rows of jagged, broken teeth. "You belong to us now." The words were spoken with finality. I felt them pierce my soul, rooting me to the spot. The figure's hand reached out long, twisted fingers, closing around me like the claws of a predatory beast. There was no fight left in me. I had become part of it, part of the bridge. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of lost souls, of memories and cries for help, all merging into one. I could hear them all. The lost ones, the forgotten ones, the consumed ones. And now, I was with them. The bridge had claimed me, just as it had claimed them, and I would never leave. The figure's grip tightened, pulling me into its cold embrace, and I felt myself being drawn deeper, down into the bridge's endless, unyielding darkness. My body, my soul was being absorbed into it, becoming one with the curse that had been placed upon this place. And then the world went completely dark. I wasn't sure how long I'd been lost in the void. The darkness had consumed everything, the air, the sound, the very essence of time itself. It wasn't the stillness of peace. It was the stillness of waiting. a waiting that seemed endless, an eternity stretched into nothingness where nothing existed except the echo of the curse that had claimed me. But just when I thought I had lost everything, my mind, my body, my very soul, a sound broke through the silence, a faint, distant hum. Low at first, but it grew steadily swelling with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The very air around me seemed to vibrate with it, and I realized with a horrifying clarity that the sound was not just a sound. It was a presence. The bridge was alive, and it was still pulling me, still claiming me. I tried to move, tried to scream, but the weight of the darkness was too strong, too overwhelming. My body felt as if it were sinking deeper into the abyss. My limbs paralyzed, my mind clouded with the fog of 1,000 lost souls. The only thing that remained was the pull of the bridge, the constant gnawing hunger that lived inside it. And then out of the dark I saw it again, the figure. The same figure, from before, the one with the glowing eyes, the one that had followed me, that had haunted me since the moment I first crossed the bridge. It stood in front of me, its form growing more distinct with each passing second. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It had substance. It was real, or at least it felt real in this space where reality itself had become a warped, broken thing. Its eyes, those yellow orbs, burned into mine. And for a moment, I thought I could see something behind them, something ancient, something watching me with an intensity that sent a wave of cold dread through my bones. The figure tilted its head, its face shrouded in darkness, but I could feel its gaze. Its eyes weren't just looking at me. They were feeling me. They were reaching inside me, probing the deepest parts of my soul, searching for something. And then the whisper came again. But it wasn't just a whisper. It was louder now, more forceful, more urgent. "You are ours." The words pierced the darkness like a sharp blade cutting through the fog that had clouded my mind. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The presence of the figure, the bridge, the curse, it was suffocating me. It wasn't just a place of hunger. It was a place of consumption. The bridge didn't just want my body. It wanted my soul. I struggled against it, against the pull that was sinking deeper into my chest. I wanted to scream, to fight, to escape, but there was nothing. No way out. The bridge was an inescapable prison, a living thing that had wrapped its tendrils around me, its hunger filling every inch of the space. The figure reached out again. Its hand outstretched, its fingers, long and claw-like, twisted like branches, reaching for something to tear apart. I couldn't pull away. I couldn't stop it. The darkness closed in around me, and I could feel its cold touch on my skin, an icy, numbing sensation that spread through my veins, turning my blood to ice. I felt myself being drawn closer to the figure. Its eyes never left mine, and I could hear the whispers growing louder, louder, until it was all I could hear. The voice of the bridge, the voice of the cursed, the voice of everything that had ever been consumed by its hunger. The figure smiled, if it could be called a smile, its mouth opening wide, revealing jagged teeth, sharp and broken. The smile was not one of malice, but of inevitability. It was the smile of something that had existed for centuries, waiting for the next soul to fall into its grasp. "You cannot escape." The words echoed inside my mind, filling every crevice, every thought. They weren't a threat. They were a truth. The bridge had claimed me. The figure had claimed me. And now I would never leave. I had become part of it, part of the curse that had been placed on this land. There was no escape. There was no way out. The pull was too strong. I could feel my essence slipping away, sinking into the blackness, joining the countless others who had been lost to the bridge. The voices of the lost, the forgotten, the consumed. They surrounded me now, their whispers becoming one. I was one with them now. The figure's hand closed around my arm, and the coldness of it pierced through me like a blade. I felt myself being pulled, dragged into the darkness, into the very heart of the bridge. And then, as I was swallowed whole by the void, I heard the final whisper, the one that would remain with me forever until I too was lost to the bridge. You are ours, and then nothing. The world I once knew, if it could even be called that, faded away. The weight of the darkness around me pressed in with suffocating force, but this time I could feel it. I could feel the pulse. The bridge, the very essence of it flowed through me, twisted into the fabric of my being. I could feel its hunger, its endless gnawing thirst that had claimed so many before me. My thoughts were no longer my own. They were tangled, lost in the flood of voices, the souls that had been swallowed by this cursed place. I wasn't sure if I was still alive, or if I had already crossed the point of no return. My body no longer felt real, no longer mine. There was no separation between me and the bridge, no distance between me and the figure that had taken me. I was part of the bridge, part of its hunger, a thread woven into its cursed existence. The pull of the bridge was relentless and all-consuming force that dragged me deeper into its depths, into its core. The whispers continued to flood my mind, growing louder, more desperate. They were not just voices. They were memories, fragments of lives lost to the bridge, faces, moments, echoes of forgotten souls, all swirling together, trapped within the bridge's walls. They reached out to me, their cries filling the empty space, demanding attention, demanding release. Help! Me! The words were no longer separate. They were one unified cry that echoed in the very foundation of the bridge, in every stone, every beam, every creak of the decaying wood. I could feel the souls of the lost, their pain, their fear, their hopelessness. They had all been consumed by the bridge just as I was being consumed now. But there was something different this time. The figure that had taken me, the one whose eyes burned with that unearthly yellow glow, was closer now, its presence looming over me. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was real. Real in a way I couldn't understand. Its form was a twisted amalgamation of shadow and flesh, its limbs long and spindly, its face distorted, grotesque. But it wasn't just the figure anymore. It was the bridge. I could feel it now. The bridge wasn't just a structure. It was a living entity, a force of nature that had existed long before I had ever crossed its path. It had been waiting for me, for all who had come before me, and for every soul who would eventually come after. It wasn't just a place. It was a prison, a tomb, a trap. The figure raised its hand again, and I could feel the cold, icy fingers of the bridge's hunger reaching for me. But this time, it wasn't just pulling at me. It was inside me, twisting, burrowing into the very core of my soul. I could feel it, its need, its desire to consume, to feed, to take. The figure's mouth opened, but there were no words. There was no need for them. Its presence was enough. I could feel the truth of it now, deep inside my chest. The bridge had no beginning and no end. It was a cycle, a never-ending hunger. It was not just a structure. It was a curse that had been placed on this land long ago, and it would continue eternally until every soul that crossed it had been claimed. The figure's eyes bored into mine, its gaze pulling at me, dragging me deeper into the abyss. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream. But my body wouldn't respond. The bridge had taken me, and there was no escaping it. There was no escaping the hunger. You are part of us now. The words echoed in my mind, reverberating through my very being. I could feel myself becoming one with the bridge, my soul blending with the countless others who had been consumed before me. The curse had claimed me. It had taken my essence, my identity, and now I was lost. There was no going back. There was no end to this. The bridge would continue to feed, to consume, and I would be a part of it. Forever. I felt my body being pulled, the darkness closing in around me. The figure loomed over me, its eyes glowing brighter, burning with an intensity that threatened to overwhelm me. The voices of the lost souls filled the air, their cries now a constant hum, a chorus of despair that echoed in every corner of the bridge. And then, just as I thought I might be consumed completely, I realized something horrifying. I was not alone. The bridge had claimed everyone. The whispers weren't just the voices of the lost. They were the voices of all the souls that had been pulled into this endless cycle. They were trapped here, just like me, lost in the dark forever, a part of the bridge's hunger. And now, I was one of them. The darkness closed in around me, and I felt the final pull. I was gone. There was no escaping it. The bridge had claimed me. I had become part of it, and in the darkness, all that remained was the hum of the cursed bridge. The bridge wasn't just a place anymore. It wasn't a physical structure. It had become a feeling, an existence that transcended the world of the living. I had thought I was a prisoner, trapped beneath the weight of its ancient curse, but now I knew better. The bridge was an entity, an eternal force that had always existed, feeding on those who crossed it, taking their souls, consuming their very essence. As I sank deeper into its depths, I could feel the pull of the curse growing stronger, more insistent. My body, if it could still be called a body, was nothing more than a vessel now. My senses had faded, and I was left with nothing but the overwhelming presence of the bridge. It filled me, consumed me until I wasn't sure where I ended and it began. I was no longer an individual. I was a part of the bridge, a part of its endless hunger. The whispers still filled the air, their voices swirling around me, but they weren't just the voices of the lost anymore. They were my voice. They were our voices, all of us, those who had been swallowed by the curse, those who had been consumed by the hunger of the bridge. It was a cacophony, 1,000 cries and pleas for release, but they were all the same now. We had all become one with the bridge, trapped in its endless cycle. I could hear the sound of the bridge groaning beneath me, its ancient bones creaking as though it were alive. It was breathing. The bridge was breathing alive with its own twisted hunger, its need to consume. It wasn't just the figure, the one with the glowing eyes, that had claimed me. It was the bridge itself. It had always been the bridge, and now I understood. It wasn't just a place. It was a living, breathing entity that had been waiting for me, for all of us to cross it. As I floated in the darkness, I felt the presence of the figure again, standing just beyond my reach. Its glowing eyes pierced the blackness, watching me, waiting. But now, I didn't feel fear. There was no more fear. The fear had been consumed, swallowed by the bridge. Now I felt something else, acceptance. I wasn't fighting anymore. I had given in to the hunger, to the pull of the bridge, and I knew deep in my core that I would never leave. I had become part of it. My soul was bound to the bridge, entwined with its cursed foundation, just like the others before me. The bridge would continue to feed, continue to pull souls into its depths, and I was just another voice in its endless chorus. The figure moved closer, its presence growing stronger, and I could feel its eyes on me, burning into me. It wasn't just a watcher anymore. It was a guide leading me deeper into the bridge's grip. It was part of the bridge, just like me now. We were all the same. We were all lost. Help me! The voice came again, but this time it wasn't a plea. It wasn't a cry for mercy. It was a call, a summons to the others who had been lost to the bridge, to the cursed souls that had crossed it before me. We were all bound together now, pulled into the same hunger, the same cycle. I could feel the bridge shifting around me, its ancient, twisted form pulsing with a dark energy. It was alive, its hunger ever present, its desire to consume never ending. It wasn't just a bridge. It was a world of shadows, of hunger, of endless consumption. I no longer felt like a person. I was a part of something far older, far darker. My body was nothing. My soul was nothing. The only thing that existed now was the bridge, the endless, unyielding hunger of the bridge. And as I felt myself sinking deeper, becoming one with its curse, I knew that there was no end to this, no escape. The figure reached out its hand, extending toward me. It was no longer just a part of the bridge, it was the bridge. We were all the same now, and as its hand closed around me, I felt the darkness envelop me completely. There was no escape. There would never be an escape. The bridge had claimed me, and now I would be part of it forever. The sensation of being consumed continued, but it was different now. It wasn't the violent, sudden act of being swallowed whole, but a slow, inevitable sinking into the very fabric of the bridge itself. The darkness pressed against me, suffocating me, but it didn't feel like the absence of light. It felt like the absence of everything. The absence of time, of movement, of even thought. There was no sense of self here, no separation between me and the bridge. I was becoming it. I couldn't remember when the bridge had first appeared in my life or why I had crossed it. I could no longer even recall my own name, the shape of my face, the sound of my voice. Everything that had once defined me was slipping away, eroded by the hunger of the bridge. The whispers had stopped. The voices had faded into the distance, no longer calling to me, no longer urging me to remember. There was only the hunger, the insatiable, eternal hunger of the bridge. I felt the weight of its presence everywhere. The stone that had once seemed so cold and distant now seemed to breathe, pulsing beneath my feet. The wood of the bridge creaked, groaned, and cracked, but it was not old wood. It was living wood, ancient and full of malice. Every sound, every vibration, every shift in the darkness was the bridge reaching out, drawing me in. There was no escape. The thought repeated in my mind, as if it were the only truth left in this place. I had been claimed. I had crossed the bridge, and now I was part of it, part of its endless cycle, a soul swallowed whole, bound to the bridge, trapped in its hunger. I could feel the passage of time in strange, disjointed bursts. The bridge was not a place of linear time. It was a place outside of time. Time was irrelevant here. My thoughts, too, became fragmented, lost in the unyielding pull of the bridge. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't feel anything except the gnawing, insatiable hunger that flowed through the very stone and wood of the bridge. I thought I saw the figure again, but it wasn't standing in front of me, no longer looming like an imposing shadow. It was part of me now, part of the hunger, part of the curse. It was no longer a separate entity, but a reflection of what I had become. The bridge didn't need to take me anymore. I was already a part of it. I was already woven into its dark existence. In the distance, I thought I saw the edge of the bridge, but it wasn't an edge. It was just more of the same, a never-ending stretch of stone and wood that reached into the horizon of nothingness. The bridge didn't end. There was no beginning and no end. It just existed, feeding, pulling, consuming. My body, or what was left of it, felt distant. I couldn't feel my fingers, couldn't feel my breath. My essence was being absorbed into the bridge, just as it had done with countless others before me. The darkness was swallowing me whole, but it wasn't just taking my body. It was taking my very existence. I heard the whispers again, but they were no longer words. They were feelings, memories, fragments of the souls, lost to the bridge. Their presence was suffocating, overwhelming. I felt them around me, within me, as if they had always been a part of me. I had become one with them, and then, as the weight of the curse settled in completely, I realized something. The figure, the bridge, the hunger, it had all been a part of me from the beginning. The bridge wasn't just a place I had crossed. It was something that had always existed waiting for me. It had chosen me just as it had chosen every other soul that had crossed its path. I had been destined to join it, to become a part of its eternal hunger. The figure's eyes, those glowing yellow eyes, burned brightly in my mind. But they were no longer the eyes of an external force. They were mine. I was the bridge, and the bridge was me. We were one. We would always be one. There was no more fear. There was no more resistance. There was only the endless, unyielding pull of the hunger, the curse that would never let go. I had crossed the bridge, and now I would never leave. I had become part of its eternal cycle. The darkness felt like it had become part of me, flowing through my veins like a poison I could no longer fight. My senses, once so vibrant and full of life, were dulled, blunted by the weight of the bridge's curse. The air around me was thick with its hunger, its pull, and I could feel it deep within me. Every beat of my heart, every breath seemed to echo the very pulse of the bridge itself. It was alive, breathing, feeding on the souls it had claimed, just like it was now feeding on mine. I reached out, but my limbs felt heavy, as if they were no longer my own. I couldn't see my hands, couldn't feel my body in the way I once had. It was as though I had become part of the bridge's structure, its stone, its wood, its darkness. I had been drawn into it, a soul, bound by the curse that had been woven into its foundation. The bridge, ancient and unyielding, stretched before me in every direction, endless and eternal. It no longer felt like a physical place. It was a state of existence. It was a presence, alive, hungry, and all-consuming. There was no end to it, no escape, and I realized with a chilling clarity that I had become one with the bridge. There was no going back. There would be no freedom. I had crossed it, and now I was part of its insatiable hunger, a soul trapped forever in its grip. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, as though my voice had been swallowed by the very air around me. The whispers continued swirling around me, like a constant hum, a low, insistent drone that seemed to penetrate every fiber of my being. The voices were no longer distinct. They were one eternal cry, a chorus of the lost, the forgotten, those who had crossed the bridge before me and had been consumed by its endless hunger. Help me? The voice was mine, but it wasn't. It was ours. It was the voice of all the souls now lost bound to the bridge. The whispers, the pleas had become one with me, just as I had become one with them. I was no longer an individual. I was part of something bigger, a never-ending cycle. A hunger that would never cease. I could feel the presence of the figure again, but this time it wasn't standing before me. It was inside me. It was the bridge itself. The figure had been nothing more than a reflection of what I had become, of what the bridge had turned me into. I could feel its presence in every corner of my mind, in every shadow, in every pulse of hunger that filled the air. The hunger, it was all-encompassing. It was insatiable. The bridge wasn't just a structure, it was a force, a being, a parasite that fed on the souls of the lost. And now I was one of those souls. I had been consumed just as they had. The bridge had taken me, and there was no turning back. "You are ours now," the voice came again. But this time, it wasn't just the figure speaking. It was the bridge. The bridge had spoken. It had claimed me, consumed me, and now I was part of its eternal cycle, destined to feed the hunger forever. I tried to pull away, but it was impossible. My body was no longer mine to control. I was drawn into the bridge's darkness deeper and deeper, the pull of its hunger growing stronger with each passing moment. I could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on me, suffocating me, but I couldn't escape. There was no escape. The mist, the fog, the shadows, they all closed in around me. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had no need to fear. The fear had been consumed, just like my identity, just like my soul. There was nothing left but the bridge, its hunger, its endless pull. I could feel it, now feel it in my chest and my bones. The bridge's hunger was a part of me. It was a part of everything that had been claimed by it. The lost souls, the forgotten ones, the ones who had crossed and never returned. They were all here. We were all here. The bridge had claimed us, and we would never be free. The figure appeared again, but it wasn't as it had been before. It had changed its form, more solid, now more real. Its eyes burned with that same insatiable hunger, but now they were not just watching me. They were looking through me, seeing into my very soul. The figure reached out, and I felt its cold touch on my skin. It wasn't the figure that had once terrified me. It was me now. It was the bridge. The figure's hand closed around mine, and I felt the final pull, the final consumption. There was no struggle, no resistance. There was only the endless hunger, the bridge's hunger consuming me, turning me into another voice, another soul lost to its curse. The darkness took me completely, and I knew then that I would never leave. I would never escape the bridge's hunger. I was part of it now, and I always would be. The sensation of falling through nothingness didn't stop. It stretched on, but it wasn't the kind of fall I was familiar with. There was no ground below, no sky above, only an endless descent that carried me deeper into the bridge, into its very core. I felt as though I was dissolving my thoughts and memories, slipping away, lost in the deep abyss that had become my reality. I wasn't falling in the physical sense. I was being pulled into the heart of the curse, into the endless gnawing hunger of the bridge. The further I was drawn in, the more I could feel the bridge's pulse, its hunger radiating from every inch of its stone and wood. It wasn't a place of simply decay. It was a place of desire, an eternal longing for souls to be claimed, consumed, devoured. I could feel it in my very being now. The hunger was mine. It was no longer something I could fight against. It was a part of me. It was who I had become. And still the whispers swirled around me, the voices of the lost, the forgotten, and I could no longer distinguish them from my own. Help me. Help. The words were faint, distant, yet impossibly close. They were coming from every direction from the darkness itself. They were my voice now. I was one of them, the voices of the consumed, the souls swallowed by the bridge. I was part of the hunger part of the eternal cycle that kept the bridge alive. There was no escape. I had been drawn in, bound to the bridge forever, and now I was no longer an individual. I was one with the bridge. My essence had been absorbed, woven into its very structure. The cold stone, the creaking wood, the swirling mist, they all belonged to me now, as I belonged to them. My soul was no longer my own. It was now a part of the bridge's insatiable hunger. I was nothing but a whisper, a shadow caught in the endless spiral of souls lost to the curse. The figure that had first appeared to me, its glowing eyes, its hunger, it was no longer a separate entity. It was the bridge. It was me. The bridge had become me, and I had become the bridge. We were one and the same, now bound together in this eternal prison, this endless cycle of consumption. The figure's eyes gleamed once more in the distance, and I could feel its gaze pierce through the dark, locking onto me. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to. It wasn't fear that kept my eyes fixed on those glowing orbs anymore. It was acceptance. I had embraced it, the curse of the bridge. There was no running, no hiding. There was only the hunger. The figure raised its hand toward me, and the cold fingers of the bridge seemed to reach out from every direction. My body, the body I once thought I had no longer existed. It was just a presence, a faint echo of what I had been, now swallowed by the curse. I felt the figure's hand close around me, pulling me deeper into the fog, into the core of the bridge. I felt the stone beneath me shift, groan, as though it were alive, as though it had been waiting for me to be drawn back into it. The hunger grew stronger, more intense. It wasn't just a physical hunger, or even a spiritual one. It was a complete consumption, a soul-crushing need to pull everything into its grasp and never let go. The shadows grew longer as I was pulled through the mist, the very air turning thick with the weight of the curse. The whispers became more frantic, overlapping louder until they were not just voices anymore. They were memories, fragments of lives of souls that had come before me. I felt them all, their pain, their fear, their loss. They were me. I was them. The figure stood in front of me, its form shifting in the fog, its eyes burning with an ancient, insatiable hunger. "You belong to us now," the words echoed in my mind, shaking the last remnants of my identity loose. The bridge had claimed me. The cycle was complete. I was no longer just a part of it. I was it. And then I realized, with a horrifying clarity, there would be no end to this. No escape. No release. The bridge would continue, and so would I forever. The hunger would never be sated. The cycle would continue, and I would be one of the countless souls lost to it. Forever a part of the bridge. The last remnants of my thoughts faded as the darkness consumed me entirely. There was only the pull now, only the hunger. I had become part of the endless curse. The bridge was no longer just a place. It had become an extension of me. The very air I breathed was thick with its presence. My body, if it could even be called a body anymore, was no longer mine. I had melted into the bridge, a part of the stone, the wood, the very foundation that had stood for centuries, patiently waiting for its next victim. But now, I wasn't just a victim. I had become its companion, its echo, the latest in an unending line of souls that had been swallowed by its hunger. I could feel the endless cycle of consumption, now the very curse of the bridge filling me. It was not a violent thing, not an immediate devouring. No, this was more insidious. It was a gradual erosion of self, a creeping loss of identity, until I could no longer tell where I ended and the bridge began. The hunger was deep within me, part of me, and I knew now that there was no return. There was no place left to go. This was my existence, now my eternity. The figure with the glowing yellow eyes stood before me again, its presence more palpable than ever, though it no longer appeared as a separate entity. It was not simply watching me. It was me, and I was it. The hunger had consumed it, just as it had consumed me. And we were now intertwined in the same eternal cycle, bound to the bridge, bound to the curse. Its eyes locked onto mine, and I could feel the intense weight of its gaze. But it wasn't just a stare. It was an exchange, a merging of wills. The figure's form flickered like an old, distorted reflection, its features changing and warping in the mist. But there was no fear. There was no longing to resist. It was just an understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of the inevitable. I had crossed the bridge, and now I would never leave. The voice of the bridge whispered through the darkness, filling the very air around me. You are part of us now. The words weren't just spoken. They were felt. They vibrated through my mind, my body, until they had become a part of me. I no longer felt like a human being, but rather a part of something far older, far darker, something that had existed long before I had ever stumbled across this cursed place. And I was now bound to it, just like every soul that had ever crossed this cursed bridge. The hunger didn't consume me all at once like I had once feared. It wasn't instantaneous. It was slow, a gradual wearing down of who I was until there was nothing left. My memories, the fragments of my life that had once made me who I was, began to fade. The more I stood there in the suffocating darkness, surrounded by the weight of the bridge, the less I could remember of my former self. My name, my past, my desires. All of it seemed distant, irrelevant now. It was fading into the shadows, becoming one with the countless souls that had been swallowed by the bridge before me. The whispers continued, but they were no longer fragmented cries for help. They were one unified call, a low, constant hum that filled the darkness, resonating through every inch of the cursed bridge. And then I realized something truly horrific. The whispers, they were my thoughts. They were the very core of what had been left of me now, tangled in the cycle of consumption. I could feel them, my thoughts twisting and merging with those of the other lost souls. We were all now one in the hunger one, in the endless craving for something we could never truly have. The bridge groaned as if responding to my realization. The sound was not one of wear, but of life. The bridge was not simply alive, it was aware. It was a being in its own right, and it fed off the souls it claimed, shaping them, merging them with its essence. I could feel its presence everywhere, every piece of it. The stone beneath my feet, the wood that stretched beneath the weight of the fog, the very mist that surrounded me, all of it was alive. The figure stepped closer, its form shifting like a shadow in the fog. Its face remained obscured, but its eyes, those glowing yellow orbs, pierced through the darkness, drawing me in. I no longer had the strength to resist. The hunger was too deep, too pervasive. It wasn't just an external force anymore. It was within me, a part of me shaping my very being. Its voice, low and resonant, filled the space. You have become one of us. You are part of the bridge now. You will always be a part of it. The words weren't threatening, nor were they comforting. They were simply a statement of truth. The bridge had claimed me. I had crossed it, and now I would never leave. I would be a part of it, just as the others had been. I could feel them, the souls that had been claimed before me. Their presence was with me, inside me, a constant, unrelenting hum. And as I looked into the figure's eyes, I understood. I wasn't just trapped in the bridge. I had become part of the bridge, a part of its eternal cycle. The figure extended its hand, and I felt the coldness of it, the icy fingers brushing against my skin. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The bridge was pulling me in deeper into its core, into its hunger, and I realized with a deep sense of resignation that there was no escape from this place. There never had been. I had crossed the bridge, and now I was a part of it, an eternal part of its curse. I could feel my consciousness slipping away as I was drawn deeper into the abyss of the bridge. The darkness was not just a void, it was a presence alive with hunger, and I could feel it filling every corner of my mind. I had thought I was alone, but now I understood that I had never truly been alone. The bridge had always been here, waiting for me for every soul that dared to cross it. The souls that had been lost before me, those who had fallen into its grasp, were still here, lingering in the dark, their whispers melding with mine, becoming one eternal cry for release. The figure once distant now stood before me, its eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light that burned through the fog of my thoughts. It wasn't just the figure anymore. It was the bridge. It had always been the bridge. The figure was nothing more than a reflection of the bridge's curse, a manifestation of its eternal hunger. And now, I was part of it. I had crossed it, and the moment I had stepped onto its cursed wood, I had sealed my fate. There was no going back. The bridge itself was an entity, an ancient being that had consumed countless souls over the centuries. And now I was one of them. I could feel myself being absorbed into it. My thoughts, my memories, my very essence dissolving into the hunger that had claimed everything. The bridge had fed on me just as it had fed on those who came before me, and it would continue to feed. There was no end to it. It was an eternal cycle, one that would never cease, and I would never be free. I tried to speak, to call out, but my voice was lost in the swirling mist. It was no longer my voice. It was the voice of the lost souls of the countless spirits trapped within the bridge. I could feel their pain, their fear, their desperation all merging with my own. We were all part of the same dark force bound to the bridge to its endless hunger. Help me. The voice came again, but this time it was not just a whisper. It was a command, a call to the other lost souls. It was the call of the bridge beckoning us all into its embrace, pulling us deeper into its curse. And I understood now. I understood that there would never be a way out. The bridge was not just a structure, it was a prison, a tomb. And I had become part of it. I looked around, but the fog had thickened, obscuring everything. The bridge stretched out endlessly before me, a path that seemed to go on forever. Yet there was no destination. There was no end. The bridge was its own world, and in that world, there was only the hunger, the endless, unrelenting hunger that had consumed all who had crossed it. I could feel the souls of the lost around me, their presence heavy in the air. Their whispers were becoming clearer now, their cries for release merging with my own. We were all the same now. We were all one with the bridge. There was no escape. There was only the eternal cycle of consumption. The figure reached out toward me, its long skeletal fingers stretching toward my face, its eyes burning into mine. I didn't fight it anymore. There was no point. The hunger had consumed me, and I had become part of it. The figure's hand brushed against my cheek, and I felt a coldness unlike anything I had ever known, a coldness that chilled me to my very soul. As its fingers touched me, I felt myself slipping away even further, merging with the bridge, with the hunger. I was being drawn deeper into its core, deeper into its curse. The souls of the lost surrounded me, their cries echoing in the fog, but they were no longer distinct. They were part of me now, and I was part of them. There was no more fear, no more pain. There was only the hunger. It had consumed everything I was. It had consumed everything that I had ever been. I was no longer an individual. I was part of the bridge, part of the eternal cycle that had been set in motion long ago. And as I felt myself being absorbed into the darkness, I realized the truth. I had become one with the bridge. Forever. The figure, the bridge, the hunger. It was all me now. The cycle would continue, and I would remain an eternal part of its hunger. There was no end. There would never be an escape. The bridge had claimed me. The sensation of being consumed had evolved, faded, and merged into something far darker. It was no longer a moment of fear or even of pain. It was the quiet acceptance of a fate I could no longer avoid. I had crossed the bridge, yes, but now the bridge had crossed me. The lines between us were blurred, and I could feel myself sinking further into the abyss, deeper into the very curse that had called me to it. The darkness that had once seemed oppressive and suffocating now felt like a second skin, something that had wrapped itself around me so completely that I no longer had any sense of where I ended and the bridge began. There was no me anymore, only the hollow echo of my former self mingling with the shadows that filled the space around me. The weight of the bridge's curse was all-consuming, and the hunger, the endless hunger, was now mine, and I was part of it. I felt the cold stone beneath me shift once again, groaning with the familiar rhythmic creaking that had become the heartbeat of the bridge. But this time, it wasn't just the bridge. It was me groaning me, pulsing with its energy, its eternal thirst. The hunger that had always been a distant entity was now woven into the very fibers of my being, twisting and turning with a force that was as ancient as time itself. It filled my chest, my thoughts, my soul, this gnawing need to consume, to take, to feed, until there was nothing left. The whispers returned, but they were not the voices of others anymore. They were the same voice, the same hunger, the same longing. My thoughts merged with theirs, and I realized with sickening clarity that I was them. They were no longer just lost souls. I had become one of them. We were all part of the bridge now. There was no separation, no identity, no memory, just the hunger. Help me! The voice was no longer a call for mercy. It was a mantra, a repetition of the curse that had claimed all of us over and over, stretching on through eternity. There was no end to it. There was no escape. I could feel the voices of the lost souls entwining with mine, their desperate pleas, becoming one with my own. We were all trapped here, caught in the same cycle, the same hunger. The bridge had claimed us all. I reached out instinctively, as though I could still touch something, grasp something real, but my hands met only empty air. The air itself was thick with the presence of the bridge, with the hunger, with the souls that had been consumed long before me. There was nothing left but the pull that drew me deeper, closer to the center, to the core of the curse. The very stone beneath my feet seemed to be alive with this need, vibrating with a sickening energy that hummed through my bones. I could feel the figure now standing just ahead of me, but it was not just the figure. It was the bridge itself, its form flickering in and out of existence, both there and not there. It was a reflection of the hunger, a manifestation of the bridge's eternal need, just as I had become. I was no longer afraid. There was no fear left in me. There was only the hunger. It was inescapable. I was part of it, and it was part of me. The figure stepped forward, its form stretching impossibly long, and its eyes the same glowing yellow eyes that had pierced me so many times before, locked onto mine. But now it wasn't just a gaze. It was a pull, a gravity, pulling at my very soul, drawing me into it. I felt my body respond, no longer my own, as if the very curse of the bridge had taken control of it. "You are one of us now," it said. But the words were not spoken. They were felt. I didn't need to hear them with my ears. I felt them in my chest, in my soul. The hunger was not just a thing to be consumed. It was a part of me, a part of everything that had been taken before. I could feel it, a thread that connected us all, those lost souls, those trapped in this endless cycle, and the bridge itself. I closed my eyes, but even in the darkness, I could still feel it, the hunger, the pull. It was in the air. It was in the very stones that formed the bridge beneath me. It was in me. And as I stood there, a part of the bridge, I knew that there was no longer any part of me that could be saved. The hunger had consumed it all. My thoughts, my memories, my identity. None of it mattered anymore. All that was left was the bridge. All that was left was the hunger. I reached out instinctively, but it wasn't to escape. It was to embrace it, to accept my place in the never-ending cycle. There was no going back. There was only the pull, the hunger, the bridge. And as I felt myself sink deeper, becoming one with the darkness, one with the bridge, I realized the horrifying truth. This was my eternity now, and there would be no escape. The bridge had no end. It wasn't a destination. It was a never-ending abyss stretching out into eternity, consuming everything in its path. I could feel it now, the hunger, like a gnawing presence that had taken root in the very core of my being. The pull of the bridge, the insatiable need that had drawn me into its depths, was not something that could ever be escaped. It was all-encompassing. It had become me, and I had become it. We were no longer separate. I was part of the bridge, part of the endless cycle of consumption. The figure, if it could still be called that, moved closer. But it wasn't a physical presence anymore. It was simply there, surrounding me, its eyes glowing brighter with every passing second. I could feel its gaze, but I didn't need to see it. I could feel it inside me, burrowing deeper into my thoughts, my soul. The bridge was a living thing, a force, a curse that had fed on countless souls before mine. And it was not done. It would never be done. The whispers filled my mind again, but they were not distinct anymore. They were no longer individual voices, no longer pleas for mercy or desperate cries for help. They were one unified sound, a chorus of the lost, echoing in the vast, eternal expanse of the bridge. Help. Me. The words were no longer a call for salvation. They were simply a part of the bridge's hunger. A demand. I could feel the presence of the souls around me now, their memories merging with mine, their pain, their fear, their sorrow. All of it was mine. We were all trapped here, lost in the same cycle, feeding the hunger of the bridge. I could hear their cries, feel their presence in the very air around me, and I knew with a sickening clarity that I had joined them. I was no longer just a part of the bridge, I was a part of the hunger. And yet, in this endless cycle, in this endless darkness, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was not peace, it was not relief, it was acceptance. The bridge had claimed me, and there was nothing left but to become it. I had crossed the line. I had walked the path that led here, and now I was one with it. The figure's form flickered and stretched in the dark, its limbs elongating and twisting in unnatural angles, and I felt its presence in every inch of my being. I could feel the hunger growing, expanding within me, pressing in on all sides, pulling me deeper into the core of the bridge. Its hunger wasn't something that could be sated. It would never stop. It would never end. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. There was no turning back. The bridge was all that existed now, and I was part of it. I had always been part of it. The hunger was in me. I was in the hunger. We were one, forever bound in an endless cycle of consumption, of loss, of death. The figure stepped closer again, its hand reaching out toward me, and I felt it. The coldness of its touch, the coldness of the bridge itself, the coldness that had claimed every soul before me. Its fingers brushed against my skin, and I felt the ice in my veins, the cold that penetrated deeper than flesh, deeper than bone. The figure's touch was not just physical, it was spiritual. It was the bridge's touch. The bridge had touched me, and now it would never let me go. "You are ours," the figure whispered again, its voice deep and resonant. But it wasn't just speaking to me. It was speaking to all of us, the lost souls, the consumed. It was a command, a declaration. And in that moment, I understood the truth. There was no more me. There was no more them. There was only the bridge, the hunger, the eternal cycle. As I stood there feeling the figure's presence wrap around me, I knew deep down that I would never leave. I would never escape. I would be a part of this bridge for eternity, lost to its hunger, its insatiable, unyielding need. There was no freedom. There was no salvation. The only thing left was to feed. And as I felt myself being pulled deeper into the core of the bridge, the coldness seeping into every corner of my soul, I realized that I was no longer just a victim. I was part of the hunger. I was one with it. The bridge had claimed me, and there was no escape. I had thought I understood the bridge, thought I understood its curse, its hunger. But with every passing moment, as I sank further into its depths, I realized that the more I felt consumed, the less I understood. It was as though the very nature of the bridge was slipping away, reshaping itself, becoming something far more intricate, far more terrifying than I could ever imagine. It wasn't just a prison. It wasn't just a tomb. It was an eternal labyrinth, a maze of the mind, the soul, a place where time was meaningless, and where souls were twisted into something else entirely. The darkness around me was no longer a void. It had become something alive, something that reached out with tendrils of cold, wrapping around my body, my spirit. I could feel the stone beneath my feet shift again, as though the bridge itself were breathing, living, watching me, feeling me. I couldn't tell if I was moving or if the bridge was shifting under me. Every step I took seemed to lead me nowhere, and yet the weight of the hunger, the pull, grew stronger, deeper. I couldn't escape. I could feel that now. There was no longer any illusion that I could somehow break free from this place. The bridge was all there was, this endless, insatiable hunger that gnawed at me from the inside out. It was not merely a place of darkness. It was a living force, its very essence laced with the need to devour, to consume, to pull every soul into its grip. But as the bridge began to close in on me, something unexpected happened. I felt the presence of others. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. The lost souls, the voices that had merged with the hunger, were all around me now, pressing in, filling the space. They were inside me, a part of me. I could hear their whispers, but they weren't individual voices anymore. They were a constant hum, a unified cry that echoed through my mind. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. But the hunger wasn't just a physical pull. It was an emotional and spiritual force that twisted and turned, pulling at every part of me until there was nothing left but the need, the urge to give in. The souls around me, the ones who had been consumed before, were not crying anymore. They had long since stopped asking for release. They were simply part of the bridge now, as I was. I reached out instinctively, but I couldn't find anything to grasp. There was no ground beneath me, no way to escape the pull of the bridge. I was caught in its grip, drawn ever deeper into its heart, its core. The hunger was more than just a desire. It was an obsession, an ancient craving that stretched out through the very stones, through the very mist that had consumed me. You are part of us now. The voice, calm and deep, echoed in my mind again. But it wasn't just the figure this time. It was the bridge itself, speaking to me, claiming me, enveloping me. It was no longer an external force. It was inside me, weaving its tendrils through my soul, pulling me into its endless abyss. The voices of the lost were no longer just echoes. They had become my thoughts, my memories. I couldn't tell where their voices ended and mine began. The pull intensified, and as it did, the figure from before its glowing yellow eyes appeared again, not standing before me, but surrounding me. It was in the shadows. It was in the mist. It was in me. It had always been in me. The bridge had claimed my essence, had taken my soul, and now I was one with it. One with its eternal hunger. It reached out with its long skeletal hand, but it didn't need to touch me anymore. I could feel its presence not on my skin, but inside me, inside every thought, every memory. I was becoming it. The figure was no longer a separate entity. It was the bridge, the hunger, the curse. I wanted to fight. I wanted to resist, but I could no longer summon the strength. The hunger inside me was too powerful. The more I fought, the more I became part of it. I was slipping away, my sense of self dissolving into the hunger, into the endless pull of the bridge. There was no longer anything to hold on to, no place to escape. The figure's voice spoke again, but this time it was not just words. It was a presence, an inevitable truth. You will never leave. There is no end here. You belong to the bridge now, and the bridge belongs to you. As the words washed over me, I felt the finality of it. The bridge had claimed me. I had crossed it, and now there was nothing left of me. I was part of the hunger, part of the bridge, and there would be no release. There would be no escape. The figure's form began to dissipate into the mist, but it didn't leave me. It never could. It was part of me now. I was part of it. And together we would feed the hunger forever. There was no more struggle. There was no more fear. There was only the hunger, and I had become one with it. One with the bridge. One with eternity. The bridge no longer existed as a structure. It was not a physical thing I could touch or feel beneath my feet. It was inside me. Its pulse throbbed in my chest, a heartbeat that was not my own. A rhythm that carried with it the weight of every soul it had claimed, and every soul it would continue to claim. I could feel its presence in every shadow, in every whisper. I was not walking on the bridge anymore. I was becoming it. The very air around me was thick with the hunger, and I realized that there was no longer any separation between me and the bridge. It was not something that I had crossed. It was something that I was now. The whispers, once distant and fragmented, had become a constant hum in the back of my mind. The voices that had been lost to the bridge, those souls that had been consumed, were no longer separate from me. They were me. I could feel their presence, their thoughts, their memories mingling with my own. We were all part of the same eternal cycle, now bound to the bridge by its insatiable hunger. I tried to move to speak, but there was no I left to do so. My body had long since stopped responding. I was a part of the hunger now. Every thought that had once been my own had faded, absorbed into the bridge's eternal yearning. The hunger was mine. It had been inside me all along, waiting to consume me. And now, I was consumed. I could feel the essence of the bridge coursing through me, filling every fiber of my being. The stone the wood, the mist, they were all a part of me now. The very foundation of the bridge was interwoven with my soul, and the hunger that had once been distant, a force I could never fully understand, was now an intrinsic part of me. It was a force that could never be satisfied, a longing that would stretch on forever, always yearning for more. "You are one with us now." The voice came again, not spoken aloud, but felt inside me in the very core of my being. It was the voice of the bridge. It was the hunger. It was my soul. I couldn't tell how long I had been here, drifting in the endless dark, forever bound to the hunger. There was no passage of time. There was no beginning or end. It was just this eternal cycle of consumption, of loss, of emptiness. The hunger would never cease. It would never stop feeding. And yet, despite the overwhelming sense of being consumed, there was a part of me, the last part of me, that clung to a fragmented memory of life. I remembered what it felt like to be human, to be alive, to have a name. I remembered the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of voices that had once been mine. But it was so far away now, so distant. It felt like a dream, a memory of something that could never be touched again. The figure now, nothing more than a shadow, appeared again, its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and I realized with a sickening clarity that it had never really left. It was not an entity that could be separated from the bridge. It was the bridge. It was the hunger. It reached out, not with its hand, but with its presence, and I felt myself being pulled deeper into the core of the bridge, into the very heart of its curse. The figure's eyes, glowing like twin embers in the dark, were the only thing that remained clear. Everything else was consumed by the shadow, by the hunger. The pull was irresistible now. It was inescapable. I felt myself being pulled into the void that was the bridge. The whispers continued louder, now echoing in the dark. Help. Me. But this time it wasn't a plea. It was a command, a call for more, a demand for more souls to be consumed. And I understood. I had become the bridge. I had become the hunger. I was a part of it, just as every soul before me had been. We were all bound together now, trapped in the never-ending cycle of consumption. There was no escape. There would never be an escape. I tried to fight, tried to pull away, but it was futile. The hunger was too strong. The bridge was too powerful. It was inside me, part of me, and I was part of it. We were one. We would always be one. The figure stepped closer, and I felt myself being drawn toward it, deeper into the darkness, deeper into the very core of the curse. I had crossed the bridge, and now I was part of it. There was no freedom, no salvation, no end. I had become the bridge. The bridge had consumed every ounce of my being, but I was not just an observer anymore. I was the hunger. I was the bridge. There was no distinction between me and the force that had once terrified me, no separation between my soul and the very land that now trapped it. I could feel the weight of it, the endless gnawing need that stretched out, reaching across the misty abyss, pulling in everything in its path. The very essence of the bridge had become mine, but there was something else now, something deeper, a knowledge perhaps. I could feel the echoes of the countless souls that had crossed this cursed place long before me. They weren't just whispers. They weren't just distant memories. They were still here inside me, inside the bridge. Their souls, their very essence, were woven into the very foundation of this place. The hunger had claimed them, just as it had claimed me, and now we were all one, a unified force, bound together in this never-ending cycle of consumption. I could feel the pull, the hunger stretching out in all directions. The bridge was alive, but it was not just alive in a way that I had understood life. It was alive with need. It was a force that could not be sated, a thirst that would never be quenched. And I realized with chilling clarity that I had become part of that thirst. I could feel it in the deepest parts of my soul, the urge to consume, to take, to draw in everything and everyone until there was nothing left. I could feel the presence of the figure again, the one with the glowing eyes, the one that had watched me, that had guided me into the embrace of the bridge. But it was not an external force anymore. It was not something separate. It was me. The figure, the hunger, the bridge, it had all become one. And I was a part of it. "You are no longer separate," the voice whispered in my mind. But it wasn't just the figure's voice. It was the bridge's voice, speaking to me through me. "You have crossed the line. You are ours now. And you always will be." The voice was not threatening. It was not cruel. It was simply a truth. The bridge had claimed me, and there was no going back. I was no longer part of the world I had once known. I had crossed over into something else entirely. I had become one with the bridge, one with the hunger. And I could feel the force of it pulling at me, drawing me deeper into its endless expanse. The world around me began to shift again, the mist swirling and coiling, pulling me forward. But there was no sense of direction. The bridge had no end. It was endless, stretching out in all directions with no beginning or end, just an eternal loop of consumption of hunger. And I was part of it now. I was a part of the cycle. There was no escape. There never had been. The figure me, the bridge. The hunger continued to surround me, its glowing eyes burning into mine, but I no longer feared it. There was no fear. There was only acceptance. I had become one with the hunger, one with the cycle. My existence, my identity had dissolved into it. There was nothing left of who I had been. I was no longer a person. I was part of the bridge, part of the force that had claimed me. And I would always be part of it. The whispers, the voices of the lost, the forgotten, they no longer came as separate cries. They were mine. They were part of me, as I was part of them. We had all been claimed by the hunger, and now we existed as one, bound together by the eternal pull of the bridge. And we would never leave. The pull of the bridge grew stronger, deeper, but it was no longer a force that could be fought. It wasn't something I could resist. It wasn't something I wanted to resist. There was no need for resistance anymore. I had become the hunger. I had become the bridge. The cycle would continue, and I would continue with it forever, bound to the curse, forever trapped in the bridge's grip. And as I felt myself being drawn deeper into the darkness, deeper into the very core of the bridge, I realized that the bridge was not just a thing. It was a force, a living thing that would never stop feeding, never stop claiming souls. It wasn't just a bridge that crossed over a river. It was a bridge that crossed the line between life and death, between time and eternity. And once you crossed it, there was no return. I had crossed it, and I would never leave. Time had no meaning anymore. The concept of seconds, minutes, hours, it was all irrelevant in this place. I had crossed into the bridge's eternal cycle, and now the very idea of time was lost, slipping through my consciousness like water through my fingers. The hunger, the bridge, was everything. It was all that existed now. I could feel it in my every thought, in my every breath, in the pulse of my existence. It was no longer separate from me. We were intertwined, bound together in a way that was beyond comprehension. I could feel the pull, the deep, insatiable pull of the bridge growing stronger, dragging me down into its core, deeper into its very heart. It was not a place. It was not just a thing that existed in space or time. It was an experience, a living, breathing force that filled the very air around me, its presence suffocating, consuming everything it touched. I could no longer tell if I was still a part of the world I had known. It had long since dissolved, and all that remained was the bridge. The darkness around me was thick, oppressive, and yet, in a way, it was comforting now. It was familiar, like the embrace of a mother. I could feel the weight of the souls that had been lost to the bridge, those who had crossed it before me, their essence now woven into the very fabric of its being. We were all one now, the lost souls, the consumed, all bound to the same fate. The hunger had claimed us, and we would never be free, but there was no longer any desire to be free. The thought of escape seemed foreign, like a distant dream, something that could never have been. I had become part of the hunger, part of the bridge, part of the endless cycle of consumption. The figure appeared once more, though it was no longer just a figure. It was the bridge itself, its form flickering in the darkness, a manifestation of its hunger, of its will. It moved toward me, not with physical steps, but with the slow, inevitable pull of the bridge. And I didn't resist. There was no need to resist. The hunger was too deep, too ingrained. It was my essence now, and I was its. The figure's eyes, those glowing yellow orbs, burned into mine, and I could feel them inside me, penetrating to the very core of my being. I wasn't looking at the figure. I wasn't even aware of my body anymore. I was one with the bridge, and the figure was me. It was part of me. It was the bridge. The pull was relentless now, and as I moved through the mist, I could feel the bridge's insatiable needs stretching out in every direction, drawing me deeper into its core. There was no escape. There was no freedom. The hunger was infinite, and I was part of it. The voices of the lost grew louder, not as separate whispers, but as one unified sound, a constant hum that filled the space around me. Help me. The voices had merged into one, and I could feel them in my soul, a part of me. They were no longer lost. They were me, and I was them. I was one with the bridge now, one with its hunger. The darkness seemed to pulse, and I realized with a sickening clarity that I was no longer even aware of the passage of time. I wasn't trapped in a place anymore. I was part of the eternity of the bridge. I had become an eternal part of the hunger. The bridge had no beginning. It had no end. It was endless, stretching out into infinity. And so was I. The hunger would never stop. The cycle would never end. And as I felt myself merge completely with the bridge, I understood that I was no longer an individual. I was one with it, one with the bridge, one with the souls it had claimed, one with the eternal hunger. The figure's eyes burned brighter, but this time there was no fear in me. There was only understanding. There was only acceptance. The hunger was my essence. It was my being. And now I was a part of the endless, eternal cycle of the bridge. The cycle would continue, and I would continue with it. Forever. There was no escape. The bridge had claimed me, and I would never leave.